The Immortal Stranger. Starting as a traveling merchant, this video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 376 Changle. So, what did you say to that jinxing sword? When I'm still free as Tang Mao in the future, will she be socially dead when she hears about this? Zhao Chen was speechless for a long time, and finally did not ask in detail, just hoping that there would not be too many mushy words in the database of this artificial concubine. He thought about it and asked again, since that senior bay had doubts about me, why didn't he come to check it out in person, but use this roundabout method? Is it because as a Dunkso real person, you don't bother to interfere in the affairs of the younger generation? Meng Zuling nodded first, then shook his head and said, according to what Tang Lin said, there are indeed reasons in this regard, but in the final analysis, it is because she was stopped by another real person when she was preparing to go to human. As for now, she seems to have other important things, but just sent a message to Tang Lin to check on her behalf. The other real person is King Gan's 13th aunt. While Zhao Chen was guessing, he asked again, do you know who stopped Master Bei? Meng Zuling shook his head and said, Tang Lin didn't say, and I didn't ask. Is that so? Zhao Chen didn't investigate further. Since Tang Mao successfully passed the test, the suspicion on him was temporarily cleared, and no one from the Tang family or the Mu family should come to investigate in the short term. As his thoughts turned, Zhao Chen looked at Meng Zuling, who had restored his original appearance again, and said with a smile, by the way, I just need your help again. What? Meng Zuling was refreshed. This feeling of being needed often made her very excited. I want you to dress up as a bad boy and tease a girl. Huh. Since Zhan Zhen is a very conservative force, it rejects all advanced things, whether it is technology or system. Therefore, the governance of Shuzhang still remains hundreds and thousands of years ago. The gangs that were almost extinct in the Central Plains and Kaishu still exist here. The Changle gang is a gang that controls the southern part of Jingguan City. Its leader, Bei Heaton, was born in a poor family, but now has the strength of the third level of magic power, and is considered a celebrity in the city. However, none of the martial artists in Jingguan City look up to him, not because of his background. After all, there are many precedents of people who were born in a poor family and eventually became famous heroes. People will not look down on a person because of this. What really makes people in the martial arts world feel disgusted is the dirty things that Bei Heaton did. Because this man's sister was quite pretty, he personally sent her to the bed of a steward in the Shu Palace, which gave him the initial resources for practice. Afterwards, relying on this relationship, he even flattered the Shu Prince and did some dirty work for him that was inconvenient for him to show up. For example, kidnapping girls with special physiques or extraordinary looks. Because he acted cautiously, he would investigate the background of the target every time he took action, and he would give the families of those girls a lot of money subsidies. In addition, with the protection of the Shu Prince, he has not made any mistakes over the years, and he has also run the huge Changle gang. It is not that there are no young knights from famous and upright families who want to use him to fight for justice, but due to the care of the prince, they always return empty-handed. However, this time, his good luck has finally come to an end. In the main hall of the Changle gang late at night, Bei Heaton was calculating the proceeds of a trade fair held by the gang not long ago. While crackling with the abacus beads, Bei Heaton thought with both heartache and helplessness, why did His Royal Highness let me sell a precious heart like yin yang evil at this auction? Or did he specify the transaction item and could not raise the price at all? Hey, this evil spirit is priceless. If it can be given to me, I can exchange it for 3 to 4 common evil spirits and cultivate the corresponding life spells. What a pity. Just as he was sighing, he suddenly heard 2 sounds of plop and plop coming from behind him. He turned around and was shocked to find that the 2 monks sent by the Prince of Shu to protect him had fallen to the ground and were unconscious. These 2 were masters with the 9th level of magical power and perfect gangsha. Many heroes and heroines had come to assassinate them, but they were easily taken down by these 2. As for the supernatural monks, such beings would not pay attention to small figures like Bei Heaton. Even if they wanted to ask for an explanation, they would only go to the source of the Prince of Shu. But now, such masters were killed without any signs! Exclamation mark. Benny Heaton's dark face was covered with cold sweat. Although he didn't see the person who attacked him, he immediately knelt on the ground and begged for mercy without any dignity as a cultivator. I don't know which master has come to visit. Please spare my life. I'm just helping His Royal Highness the Prince of Shu to do dirty work, and I have no choice. If I have offended you unintentionally, please be magnanimous and spare me. He was born in the market, and his cultivation was forcibly improved by elixirs. His foundation was almost nothing, and he had no self-esteem that a cultivator should have. If there is no miracle, he will only reach the 6th level of mana in his life. Of course, in the eyes of more people, even the current him is actually a miracle. You can survive if you swear to give everything you have to the great Lord of the Star Chariot. A huge and majestic voice came from all directions, making Benny Heaton's mind dazed. But he quickly came back to his senses, and his face became uncertain. Obviously, he also understood the consequences of offering himself to the strange great existence. At this time, Zhao Chen, who had been hiding in the dark, said in surprise, "He can actually get rid of my doubt suggestion method in this situation? Poor character does not mean that his will is not firm. You have also seen what kind of life those poor people live outside Human City. Although they will not starve to death because of the existence of sweet potato rice, it is also quite difficult, and there is almost no hope. So, for someone like him who has leaped from a poor person to this class today, his will never be weak." The Prince of Shu took him in as a subordinate and sent people to protect him, and he also saw the fighting spirit and ruthlessness in him. If you take him in as your subordinate, you can use this. Qi Meng glanced at Zhao Chen and replied lightly. Zhao Chen shook his head and said, "Don't test me. The reason why Benny Heaton never ate sweet potato rice when he was young was because his sister lived frugally and spent all her money on him. But for his own sake, he sold his sister to the steward of the Shu Palace. I will only use such a person temporarily, and I will never keep him afterwards." Chapter 377 Fishing. While Zhao Chen and Qi Meng were talking privately, Benny Heaton was struggling fiercely in his heart. He didn't want to be controlled by a great being whose details he didn't know, but he also didn't want to lose his life. But at this moment, he, who always prided himself on being smart, had no way out. After all, even the 2 Gangsha perfection masters who were protecting him were captured, and he had no bargaining power with the person in the dark. Perhaps I can first agree to the request of the so-called Lord of the Starship Believer, and then find a way to hint to His Royal Highness the Crown Prince, after gaining his trust, and ask him to help me get rid of the hidden dangers in my body at that time. I just don't know what it means to dedicate everything of myself to the Lord of the Starship. Will even my spiritual will be distorted? Well, I can only take one step at a time. I don't know which secret organization is behind this, and what I need to do. Lord of the Starship, could it be the Star Society? Thoughts flashed through his mind one after another. Benny Heaton clearly felt that the pressure on him was getting heavier and heavier. He knew that the people in the dark were getting impatient. If he didn't express his position, he would probably die. So, the leader of the Changle gang, who climbed from a poor man to his current position, and valued his life more than anything else, gritted his teeth, then lowered his head, and shouted with all his strength, "I, Benny Heaton, am willing to dedicate my everything to the great Star Chariot Lord." As his voice with a little reluctance sounded, the light of the 16 gold Star Libra sword flashed in a place he could not see, witnessing this gift contract. In an instant, Benny Heaton felt his spiritual changes. It seemed that a magnificent palace appeared in front of him, and on the throne at the highest point of the palace, a great being whose face could not be seen was watching him. Although such a scene was fleeting, Benny Heaton suddenly lost all his thoughts of resisting the Star Chariot Lord and his followers. Although he could clearly feel the changes in himself, he was completely unable to control his thoughts and naturally became Zhao Chen's person. Then, a not very detailed plan appeared in his mind, asking him to cooperate. Looking at Benny Heaton, who acted quickly and arranged the men in an orderly manner, Qi Meng, who was hiding in the dark, glanced at the 2 Gangsha masters who were still in a coma, and asked with a smile, "What should we do with these 2 people?" "These to help the Prince of Shu to do a lot of dirty things. Although it was just for the resources for cultivation, they also got the way to die. Zhao Chen sentenced them to death with just one word, but after a pause he added, but not killing them immediately, but waiting until we ambush the Yunzi killer, so as to prevent the Prince of Shu from noticing in advance and ruining our plan. Moreover, he had promised to help Meng Zuling provide the souls of strong men in order to hold the Star God Jishan ceremony. Seeing Erlang's thoughtfulness, Qi Meng nodded, and without saying anything more, she asked with a smile, Erlang, you seem to like the word the way to death very much. Is there any allusion? It doesn't have any special meaning. I'm just missing something. Zhao Chen replied vaguely, then changed the subject and talked about something else. Meng, now the stage is set. You should also go to encounter Meng Zuling's Prince of Shu. Qi Meng smiled and said, then you, the young man who is ready to rescue the beauty, should also be prepared. In the early morning, a 12-man assassin team of Yunzi was divided into 6 teams, 2 people in a group, and shuttled between many parks and shops with the word flower in their names in the southern part of Jingguan City to investigate. After all, the information obtained from a certain collaborator was, the target will appear in a place near Flower in the south of the city between Chenxi and Washi. 2 people in one of the teams were pretending to take a walk in a street park while chatting casually. Boss, do you think we can catch that chick surnamed Qi this time? The younger killer asked unenthusiastically. When his seniors in the same group mentioned that the top brass of the Yunzi might have other plans and were not keen on hunting down the target, he didn't take it seriously, but after a series of failures, he is now gradually convinced. After all, if they really wanted to catch someone, they should have sent a cultivator with magical powers a long time ago. After all, although the woman surnamed Qi only has the cultivation level of refining orifices on the surface, her actual combat power is not inferior to that of a cultivator with many years of magical powers. The man he called boss was an ordinary looking man. He had a cigarette in his mouth, and he smiled and responded, while blowing smoke rings, it's been so many times, can't you see it? The organization's arrest of the Qi is just a cover, there must be a real target hidden. But you just need to know it in your heart, don't say anything, or you will be silenced. The younger killer sighed and said, I know. He just finished speaking, but suddenly noticed that the boss stopped, then pulled him to squat behind a bush quickly, and started the spell of hiding his body and breath. What's wrong? The young killer looked around, but didn't find anything special, and asked in confusion. Look over there. The ordinary looking man pointed to a corner of the park, and saw a woman wearing a veil, as if she had lost her soul, following a dark-faced man in a daze, and walked in front of a young man in white. The young killer recognized the identity of the black-faced man after a little identification, and said with contempt, this benevolent is doing dirty things for the Prince of Shu again, and I don't know which girl is in trouble this time. Hey, why does that girl look familiar? Of course she looks familiar, we have been chasing her for so long, can't you recognize her? The boss glanced at his subordinate and said, is it that Qi girl? No. She has so many tricks, how could she fall into the trap of benevolent, that loser? The young killer said in disbelief. He is from Shuzhan. Although his family is in decline, he joined the Yunzi, but he despises flatterers like benevolent. Don't look down on benevolent. He is experienced and has many tricks. I'm not surprised that Qi fell into his hands. But this time, it was the Shu Prince who took action personally. I didn't expect that this person is so proficient in the 12 methods of heart light. The Ming family's Gaohuan forgiveness and blessings treasure repentance is really powerful. After the boss sighed, he gave an order. You immediately send a letter to the other teams, inform the captain of what happened here, and let him decide what to do. Send a letter. If we send a letter now, won't the Shu Prince notice us? The young killer asked after a moment of stunned. Do you think that he, a master of supernatural powers, will not discover our hidden tricks? It's just that the prince doesn't care. There is another chapter later. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 378, The Divine Wind Expels Evil. This is a street park specially opened by the government for practitioners. I don't know how many martial artists gathered in Jingguan City to do morning exercises here. The leading killer dared to conclude that there were many people like the two of them who hid immediately after discovering the actions of the Prince of Shu. Even at this time, some impulsive young men wanted to step forward to be chivalrous, but most of them were stopped by the accompanying teachers. After all, if it was only Betty Heaton, most knights would not mind teaching him a lesson and let him pay the price for doing such a dirty thing in public. But since the Prince of Shu is suspected to be there, this matter is more troublesome. First, the Prince of Shu is a master of supernatural powers, and ordinary people can't beat him at all. Second, the Shu Palace has the power to enforce the law on the fiefdom. If they directly say that they want to take the girl back for investigation, everyone can only be angry but not speak, otherwise it will be against the court, which is not something most people in the world can afford. But even so, there are still a few stupid young men who are impulsive and want to find the Prince of Shu to argue. But they were tied up by the tree man branches in an instant and then fell into a coma amidst waves of mumbling. Demonic magic. It was indeed the Shu Prince himself. This thought flashed through the minds of all the experienced monks in the park, including the Yinsi killer. Although it was strange that the Shu Prince appeared in the park in person, maybe the girl's special physique made him pay much attention to her. But if that was the case, there was no need to let Betty Heaton have another try. Could it be that the Shu Prince had already planned to abandon this lackey and use him to calm the public anger? Just as the ordinary looking Yinsi killer frowned and had doubts in his heart, a hurricane suddenly hit the Shu Prince and Betty Heaton. Just as the divine wind eliminates evil, there must be heroes who shake the world. The Shu Prince was caught off guard and was forced back a few steps by the sudden divine wind on the sea, which also caused a flaw in the suggestion effect he had been applying to the woman. The veiled woman's eyes immediately regained clarity. She was also very alert. She judged the situation almost instantly and then used the method of water moon illusion body to make dozens of her figures flee in all directions. The Prince of Shu wanted to cast a spell to stop it, but was again blocked by the sudden appearance of divine wind and failed. At this time, Betty Heaton reacted and immediately commanded his Changle gang to chase the escaped woman. Although the practitioners around did not dare to confront the Prince of Shu openly, they all pretended to practice martial arts at this moment, which happened to block the way of the Changle gang members. Seeing the sudden change in the situation, the two supernatural masters were caught in a fight and had no time to take care of other things. After receiving the message, the Yinsi killers who came from other places looked at the captain of the 12-man team at the same time. The captain did not hesitate and said in a deep voice, "Chase." "Yes." The killers responded, and each chose a direction and chased after them. Only the ordinary man and the young killer who first discovered the change here were not very active and fell behind. "Boss, what is our plan this time?" asked the young killer. Since we found the key girl first, we have made a contribution. If we can really catch her later, we will benefit a lot. In that case, there is no need to chase her so hard." At this point, the ordinary looking man lowered his voice and said, "And I always feel that something is wrong." The young killer thought about it carefully and did not find any problems, so he asked in confusion, "What's wrong?" "I can't say it well. I just feel that what happened is too dramatic, as if it was rehearsed." The ordinary looking man touched his chin and said, "But reality is always full of drama, isn't it?" The young killer disagreed. "That's true." The ordinary looking man nodded, but he soon heard something, and his expression changed. That little girl surnamed Qi actually left the city? Did she feel that she had offended the Prince of Shu and dared not stay in Jingguan City any longer? The young killer who also received the news muttered and looked strangely at the boss, who was still leading the way in front. "The captain asked us to gather outside the city, but the road you are leading is wrong." "That's right, it's the wrong road." The man called boss by the young killer sneered. "This is a trap. I would be stupid to step into it." The young killer was already convinced by his boss and did not refute. He just asked in surprise, "What do you mean?" "Others don't know how difficult the key girl is, but how can we who have been following her since she entered Shu not know?" With her cunning, even if she offended the Shu Palace, she would never choose to leave the city at this moment, but would seek shelter from the upper clans or aristocratic families in the city. The fact that she will leave the city itself means a trap. The man with an ordinary face squinted his eyes. Indeed, the little girl surnamed Key will most likely do as you said, boss. The young killer also reacted, with a look of realization on his face. After a pause, he asked carefully, should we remind the captain? Remind? Do you have evidence? Just based on our judgment? The man sneered and continued, what's more, the captain is stubborn, and has always been eager to make meritorious deeds. If we remind him, it may make him more radical. And even if it is verified later that our reminder is true, he will not thank us, but will hate us for it. So, it's better not to do it. The young killer heard this and said a little entangled, but if we don't do anything, we can't explain it later, right? You are right. In this way, let's go directly to the judge now. Jing'an City, Shuang Mansion. Mingzhu Dao, the Prince of Shu, was very satisfied with the service of Fairy Qingqiang of the Flower God Sect and a group of flower fairies under her command. He was walking out of the bedroom with an unsatisfied look when he saw his butler running over in a hurry. What happened? Mingzhu Dao asked indifferently when he saw the situation. Sir, someone pretended to be you and robbed a commoner girl. He also fought with a monk with magical powers in a park in Nancheng district. The butler reported at a very fast speed. Impersonating me? A little calculation can tell the truth, right? Does anyone believe this? Mingzhu Dao said with amusement. As a royal family, it is not so easy for the children of the Ming family to impersonate. The royal aura on their bodies alone is difficult to simulate. But precisely because of this, no one doubts Mingzhu Ling's role. Because everyone thinks that the Prince of Shu still has to have some face, even if he comes to rob people in person. He also disguises himself and restrains his royal aura. But that guy Bei Heaton is also following the fake one pretending to be you. In addition, the two elders Lingming who were protecting Bei Heaton have also lost contact, suspected to be dead. Chapter 379 Encirclement. Bei Heaton? Mingzhu Dao, the Prince of Shu, frowned, then stretched out his finger and began to deduce with his magical powers. He still valued this capable subordinate. The other party not only helped him do the dirty work, but also was responsible for a part of the intelligence work. Otherwise he would not have sent two masters of perfect gangsha to protect him. Although the influence of the Shu Palace in Shuzhou is concentrated in the Jing'an City area due to the existence of the giant pavilion, it still has the responsibility to protect the mountains and rivers and the people, and not let the demons and evil spirits have the opportunity to take advantage of it. After a while, Mingzhu Dao's expression became more and more solemn, and he thought to himself, Bei Heaton is indeed controlled, but I can't calculate any information about the person who controls him. This can only be done by a master at the Dangsuan level. But why would a real person control such a small figure to frame me? Is it for tomorrow's sword fighting conference, hoping to shake my mind? But this doesn't make any sense. After all, although not as blatant as this fake, I don't hide what I do on a daily basis, so such a negative comment will not have much effect on me at all. Or, is this a trap for me? When Mingzhu Dao was thinking, Fairy Qingqiang of the Flower God Sect walked out of the inner room with a lazy look on her face, and as she swayed her figure, the flower fairies behind her returned to the appearance of fresh flowers, gathering on her body, forming a colorful dress. Seeing her coming over, the Shu Prince's heart moved, and he said with a smile, Qingqiang, I want to ask you for help with something. Before he finished speaking, he was interrupted by Fairy Qingqiang. After last night, we are even, and maybe we will be opponents in the sword competition from now on. She was still smiling on the surface, but there was no warmth in her tone, and it seemed unusually cold. This might be the first time that the Shu Prince met a woman who was as cold and ruthless as himself when she put on her pants. He was stunned for a moment, then shook his head and said, I understand this. Well, Qingqiang, haven't you always wanted a spiritual crystal for 10,000 people? I can decide to give you one. The Flower God Sect's true martial arts, the secret of the Flower God Sutra, requires a lot of spiritual and vitality to assist, whether it is for cultivation or for advancement to a higher realm. Although Fairy Qingqiang is also a true disciple of the inner sect, she did not cultivate the first grade magical power true body of 100 flowers in the secret of the Flower God Sutra when she advanced her magical powers, so she is not valued in the true teachings. If it weren't for her good talent in biological research and embarking on another path of developing new species in the Flower God sect, the resources she could be allocated would be even fewer. But even so, spirituality and vitality are still not enough. Really? Fairy Xingcha raised her head with surprise in her eyes. She had no doubt that the Prince of Shu could come up with so many spiritual crystals because of the sweet potato rice. This resource was not scarce in the Great Xia court. Speaking of which, the Flower God sect was the first sect to develop the crop of sweet potato rice, and the purpose was naturally to plunder the soul power of mortals and make it into spiritual crystals for the sect's disciples to practice. It's just that they only dared to do it secretly at that time, for fear of being labeled as evil by their peers, so the scale was very small. But after the Great Xia court discovered the effect of the crop, it immediately promoted it. There was even Zhenjin Shengxuan who used the cave heaven he opened up to ripen it, and suddenly harvested enough sweet potato rice for all the people in the world to eat for thousands of years. The reasons for Daksha to promote this product were much more righteous. For example, it allowed the lower class people to fill their stomachs and not breed extreme emotions, which would be exploited by demons and evil spirits. It also allowed the people in remote villages to exhaust their soul power and lose their sacrifice value, thus protecting them from the harm of demons and evil spirits in disguise. When people with exhausted souls die, no evil spirits will be born, thus eliminating the possibility of ghosts and evil spirits running rampant again. It also broke through the shackles of population and improved the overall destiny of the human race. In short, the Daksha court not only obtained a large number of spiritual crystals for the arrangement of various formations, but also made the people of the world grateful to the royal family, calling the promotion of sweet potato rice the greatest good policy in 1,000 years. However, the Flower God sect, which first developed this product, was only allowed to own the spiritual crystals of the 3 southwestern states, and the harvest was extremely limited. 10,000 shares of crystals are priceless treasures. Seeing that Fairy Xingcha's attitude was loosened, Mingzu Dao smiled and nodded and said, "Of course it's true. I would never lie to anyone but you. What does the prince want me to do?" Fairy Xingcha looked at Mingzu Dao charmingly, but she sneered at his words in her heart. How could she not know what kind of character this Prince of Shu is? "I would like to ask you to go to Nancheng district, bring back several of my subordinates, and find out who is fighting there," the Prince of Shu said, and briefly recounted what happened in the park in Nancheng district. At the end, he mentioned his own guess. The person who pretended to be me may be a participant in the sword competition. Although the Prince of Shu could completely leave this kind of investigation to the palace priests, if the other party's target was really himself, he might have anticipated the people he might send out and use them to achieve the next goal. And Fairy Xingcha's joining in could muddy the waters. After all, she was a direct disciple of the upper sect Flower God sect after all. Although Fairy Xingcha was not good at calculation, she was smart and saw through Mingzu Dao's plan in an instant. But she was not angry. After all, if she was not valuable enough to be used, she would not be able to get the spiritual crystal of 10,000 people. Therefore, she hesitated for a moment and nodded. Deal. 100 miles outside Jingguan City, 9 Yanxi assassins, led by a man with a bandage on his face, surrounded Qi Meng. They cooperated tacitly. One of them used the pointing to the ground to make steel method to solidify the ground, eliminating the possibility of earth escape. One of them used the skynet to cover the sky for more than 10 feet, making the flying spell useless. Another 6 people formed a 6-star magic array. They stood in a corner, holding a flag, blocking most of Qi Meng's escape routes. Speaking of which, this formation was originally formed by 8 people holding flags, blocking the enemy from all sides. But 2 of them were not there yet, so they had to settle for the next best thing. Of the remaining 2 people, one was checking for gaps outside the formation, and the last one, the captain with a bandaged face, approached Qi Meng with a magic sword in his hand. There is another chapter later. Chapter 380, The Killer's Anger. Since Qi Meng had escaped from the hands of the Yanxi killers many times, the specifications of this siege were specially designed to deal with the Gangsha perfect monks. The captain of this Yanxi team did not talk to Qi Meng. At the moment the formation was formed, he used the magic weapon longsword to send a blow that was enough to move most of the Gangsha monks. As soon as the sword light was displayed, 7 bright sword lights flashed out from the void, forming the Big Dipper, and a strong and extremely murderous aura was also generated. Unlike the White Tiger 7 Constellations knife in Tang Mao's 7 stars Divine Mantra Sutra, although this sword is only at the magic level, its intention is more far-reaching, as if it was born only for killing. Facing this sword, that could not be avoided, as if she could only close her eyes and wait for death. Even Qi Meng, who had a plug-in, was a little moved. In the past, she would have to reveal her trump card, but at this time, it was not necessary. The compassionate-looking girl smiled slightly and stretched out a slender white finger to meet the terrible sword light, as if to show what it means to shake a tree with an ant and hit a stone with an egg. However, what is surprising is that the egg and the ant are not Qi Meng, but the captain of the Yunzi team. The sword light of the killing sword that was used with all its strength shattered in front of the seemingly weak finger, and the captain with a bandage wrapped around his face also staggered and fell from the sword light, and the pair of eyes exposed outside the bandage were full of disbelief. But then, he realized what he had encountered and shouted to his subordinates around him, "Retreat." This order can be said to be decisive, but it is still a little late. Because at this moment, the area within a radius of 1 mile has been covered by the Shangmingjiaomui formation, and all of them have nowhere to escape. This formation, which was completely arranged in advance based on the formation diagram left by Zhang Yunlu, is as powerful as a top-grade magical power. How can the group of killers in the Yunzi with magical power and Gangsha realm resist it? Even the captain with peerless swordsmanship can't do it. The reason why Qi Meng was able to break his killing sword with just 1 finger is because Qi Meng was actually protected by the formation. The opponent seemed to be killing Qi Meng, but in fact he was killing the formation itself. Of course, he would suffer a very serious backlash. Seeing the formation revealed, the captain's expression became more and more solemn. After verifying his guess, his mind turned quickly, looking for a way to break the situation. This formation is obviously at the level of magical power. It is impossible to break the formation with force. The only way now is to find the center of the formation and kill the person guarding the formation. This is the only way to win a glimmer of life before the power of the formation is completely exploded. After making up his mind, he immediately used the Bidao guidance mental method, one of his own life spells, to survey the center of the formation. This spell consumes a lot of mental and spiritual energy, so in just 1 or 2 breaths, his face was covered with sweat, and blood oozed from the corners of his eyes and nostrils. If it were usual, he would definitely stop here. After all, forcing the mental method to operate would cause permanent damage to his soul and body, and affect his future. But now, he is squeezing every bit of his mental energy regardless of anything, even if it means overdrawing his life. Because if he doesn't fight hard now, he may not have a future. Fortunately, just before the terrifying aura brewing in the formation reached its peak, the captain of the Yunzi team finally calculated the location of the Shangmingjiaomui formation. The captain, who had half of his face wrapped in bandages, was delighted, but on the surface he stabbed a sword in the opposite direction of Qi Meng's position with an unusually calm look. In an instant, the space pierced by the flying sword light rippled, and the figure of a young man appeared in front of everyone. Without the captain's order, the other members of the Yunzi team tacitly used their strongest spells and launched an attack on the boy together. Faced with such a scene, the boy just glanced at Qi Meng, who seemed to be gloating, with a half smile, as if he didn't take those attacks seriously at all. Seeing this, the captain of the Yunzi team was shocked and no longer kept his trump card. After sticking a talisman on his body, he once again combined his body with the sword and cut out a sword light that was even more powerful than before. 7 bright stars lit up on this sword light, implying the Big Dipper, regardless of anything, going forward without turning back and actually approaching the power of supernatural powers. But no matter how close it is, it's not a supernatural power. The boy, that is, Zhao Chen, sighed slightly, and then the figure of Wang Daoi overlapped with himself, and the sea god wind once again filled the entire space. Unbelievable, beyond common sense, is a supernatural power. In front of the supernatural power, even the captain's killing sword, which was close to the power of supernatural power, only lasted for a few breaths before it was declared broken, not to mention other spells. All of them collapsed in one blow. Supernatural power monk. You, a supernatural power monk, are actually setting up a formation to deal with us, the younger generation of Mana and Gangsha realm. The captain's eyes were full of grief and anger, but the backlash of the broken sword light caused him to suffer serious injuries that were enough to shake his foundation. At this time, he couldn't even move. The condition of the other Yanxi killers was not much better than him, because at this time the power of the formation had been activated, and each of them was severely damaged by the breath comparable to supernatural power, and instantly fainted. Meng Zuling, who had hurriedly come over after a long circle nearby, happened to see this scene. After looking at Zhao Chen for several times, he couldn't help but admire the judgment of his former master Du and Meng Su. This Master Chen is indeed one of the protagonists of the era. Following him, there is no worry about not collecting the souls of the strong people needed for the ceremony. I remember you can simulate a Tessie Morning Star spell called Mansion Spell, right? Put these people in there first. We have to leave here as soon as possible. Looking at Meng Zuling, who rushed over, Zhao Chen gave the order directly. Assistants are supposed to do these chores. Meng Yuling nodded slightly, and without asking why, she raised her white hand and obediently threw the 10 killers who were injured and unconscious into her mansion. While she was doing this, Zhao Chen also put away the big formation map, and then the three of them quickly left here and returned to Jingguan City. Less than a quarter of an hour after they left, a woman wearing an evil ghost mask fell from the sky and landed at the place where the big formation was just now. She was the Shu judge of the Yanxi and the highest person in charge of the organization in Shuzhou. After staring at the surrounding environment for a long time, the judge narrowed his eyes slightly and thought to himself, I can't trace back what happened here. I can only vaguely see that a thing that looks like a puppet, but not a puppet, like a human, but not a human, finally arrived. This Qi Fimeng is really tricky. I asked for a low price when I took this order, but it's not without benefits. After this time, Jianj may not take our Yanxi seriously anymore, and I have already found out the whereabouts of the target of that big order. We can start as soon as the sword fighting competition is held. Chapter 381 Crossing Jinzhang. Shuzhou, Jingguan City. It was not until nearly noon that Fairy King Qiang, who had arranged the carrier of the substitute magical power and made full preparations for resurrection, came to the South City Park, where the magical power battle broke out, and found that it had been sealed off by the 6 Gates S Gold Seal Constable. In the 6 Gates, the level of the constable is basically linked to strength. The Gold Seal Constable means the level of magical power, presiding over state affairs. The Silver Seal is for those with perfect or nearly perfect gangsha, generally the garrison constables of large cities such as Human. The Zhengayan constables below are ordinary mana and gangsha levels. As for the key and refining acupoints monks below, they can only hold the official positions of governors and assistant constables. For example, the crossing constable who was killed by the 4 Evil Hall in Bingquan town was an assistant constable responsible for the public security of the town. This Jinzhang from Jingguan City also has the surname Crossing, named Crossing Bin. He was born an orphan and was raised by the charity under the 6 Gates. He practiced the 6 Gates direct martial arts and punishment War Eagle Post. Speaking of which, most of the orphans adopted by the 6 Gates have the surname Crossing, which is also closely related to this martial arts. Fairy King Qiang has always been good at dancing with long sleeves. She also recognized this Crossing Jinzhang. She knew that this person was iron-faced and impartial, so she didn't make trouble for herself. After all, the War Eagle Claw in Iron Punishment War Eagle Post is no longer the traditional Eagle Claw Kung Fu, but transforms itself into a silicon-based War Eagle. Although it is not mysterious enough, its destructive power is really strong, and can tear itself into pieces in an instant. So, after just watching from a distance for a few times, she communicated with the flowers and plants in the park. After a while, Fairy King Qiang narrowed her eyes slightly, because she found that most of the spirituality of the nearby plants had been tampered with, and it was difficult to reproduce the scene they saw. Something is not right. According to the information from the Prince of Shu, the magical cultivator who pretended to be Ming Zudao was kidnapped by a passing magical cultivator, and the two sides fought back and forth, with no clear winner. Under such circumstances, how could the clues be handled so cleanly? Unless the two were just pretending to fight from the beginning. After making a judgment in her mind, Fairy Xingcha checked the spirits of a small number of plants that were farther away, extracting useful information from them. A group of people seemed to have been looking for something in this area before the sun rose. After seeing the girl kidnapped by the fake prince, two of the group sent a signal to the others. Are they targeting that girl as well? What is so good about this girl, that so many people are fighting for her? In addition, there was another magical cultivator present at the time, but he didn't take action. This person looks unfamiliar. I haven't seen him before, but even if he is not in the same group as the fake prince, he must know something. Well, I should be able to hand over this information to the prince, right? As Fairy Xingcha was about to return to the Shu Palace, she suddenly saw the strange supernatural power in the memory of flowers and plants walking out of the forbidden circle of the 6 gates. His face looked a little ugly, and his spirit was also sluggish, as if he had just been interrogated. Seeing this, Fairy Xingcha rolled her eyes, went straight to him, and said with a smile, "Brother, His Royal Highness the Prince of Shu invites you." She knew that her invitation might be seen by the people of the 6 gates, and even make Ming Zudao unable to explain himself, and confirm the blatant kidnapping of the girl in the morning. But what does this have to do with her? After all, the commission she accepted was just to find out who the person in the fight was, and the witness at the supernatural level in front of her might know something. The supernatural monk was stunned when he heard this. He looked back at Crossing Jinsang, who was staring at him with a covetous look, and smiled bitterly. "I'm really unlucky this year. I just escaped from the tiger's den of the 6 gates, and entered the wolf's den of the king of Shu. But I know nothing. It's all my fault that I ran in the wrong direction at that time, and I actually ran into the 6 gates. But now I have just made things clear with the 6 gates, and I was invited by the people of the Prince of Shu. I'm afraid that I will be suspected again. This supernatural monk is a witness arranged in advance by Zhao Chen and Qi Meng in order to make the people of the Yinzi believe their script. He is Feng Wantong, the supernatural power of the Feng family in Ningzhou, who is called Kikai Damo. However, plans cannot keep up with changes. Even Zhao Chen and Qi Meng did not expect that the Yinzi knew the approximate location where Meng would appear in advance and directly watch the scene, so this witness was not used at all. After Feng Wantong sighed, he looked at the beautiful female cultivator in front of him and recognized her identity. He knew that, although they both had magical powers, the gap between him, who was only of middle level quality, and this fairy might be even greater than the gap between Gangsha and Zenki. He could only bow slightly and said, "Greetings, fairy. Since the prince has summoned me, I will go." Fairy Xingcha was very satisfied with his understanding. After that, she bowed to the captain crossing from a distance, and took Feng Wantong back to the Prince of Shu's mansion. Seeing this scene, a blue-clothed constable in the park's cordon pursed his lips, and then angrily said to the leader crossing Jinsang, "Jinsang, Feng Wantong was picked up by the Shu prince's mistress, and he obviously didn't tell the truth before. Are we going to let him go?" Crossing Bin, with grey hair on his temples, shook his head and said, "I'm sure Feng Wantong did not lie, and from the traces of fighting here, it is indeed not the Shu prince who did it himself. According to the confessions we collected, Benevolent was extremely respectful to that person. If it wasn't the prince, who else could it be?" The blue-clothed constable was still relatively young, and had a relatively impulsive personality. Indeed, it didn't mean that the prince didn't do it himself. Crossing Bin nodded slightly, then changed the subject and said, "But without solid evidence, we can't summon the prince. Also, although this incident involves a dispute over supernatural powers, no one was hurt, and no one can be convicted. The Shu prince kidnapped so many innocent women. Isn't that a crime?" The young man said unwillingly. "But those things were done by Benevolent. Even the families of those girls refused to point out the faults after receiving benefits from Benevolent. So how can we possibly implicate the prince? We have to think about this matter carefully." Crossing Bin sighed. Although he has an iron-faced image, he is by no means an old stubborn person who does not know how to adapt. He understands that handling cases also requires methods and ways. A momentary impulse will only harm himself and the young people around him who still have a sense of justice. The young man in blue took a deep breath, adjusted his depressed mood, and then continued to ask, Jinzang, how should we investigate this case now? All other clues are cut off. Let's start with the identity of the kidnapped girl and see what's so special about her that is worth the prince giving up his previous caution and showing up here in person. On the other side, in Ming Zuling's mansion, Zhao Chen and Qi Fimeng also got an unexpected information from the memories of those killers. In other words, Fimeng's information was actually provided by Old Ling, the original worshipper of the Li family. The people in the underworld suspect that there is a dark and real person behind him who is good at calculations. There is another chapter later. Chapter 382 Harvest. Old Ling, the one who stripped France, the outer sect deacon of the flower god sect, of his pants. Qi Fimeng remembered who he was after a brief recollection, because she shared Zheng Qinggan's memories. Zhao Chen nodded and said, the reason why this person did such a boring thing was because of the task assigned to him by the spirit of Cheyenne Blessed Land. Speaking of which, it was the spirit of the Blessed Land that informed Zhao Chen that there would be fun outside the human city gate, so that Zhao Chen could save Zhao Royan and Zhao Fu in time. Of course, the original intention of the spirit of the Blessed Land was to stop France from investigating Gongyuan, but the means were a bit bad taste. I don't know what Old Ling asked it to be arranged to do this. Qi Fimeng smiled and shook his head and then said meaningfully, but they're dealies. Old Ling provides my location information and the underworld needs to create a riot in Jingguan City after the sword conference is held tomorrow. Then Old Ling must have a big move. I just don't know who they are targeting. This is the information directly taken out from the memory of the captain, and it is quite credible. Zhao Chen nodded slightly and then glanced at the other killers and combined with their memories, he speculated, in my opinion, the Yinzi actually has a bigger goal. The reason why they did not send out the monks with magical powers to execute the order after taking over your pursuit is not only because they did not expect you to be difficult to deal with at the beginning, but also because they are very likely trying to cover up their real purpose. This is also something that several senior killers know tacitly. They were not very enthusiastic about tracking you, but they had no choice but to meet a captain who was eager to make merit and prove himself, so they rashly stepped into our trap. Qi Fimeng squatted down and pulled off the bandage on the face of the captain. What came into view was a face that was half handsome and half terrifying, because half of this face was burned. From the information searched in his memory, this person is from Yazhaoshi, one of the 12 families. He is only a concubine's son, but he practices the 7-star Immortal sword box, one of the Shi family's family skills. Qi Fimeng introduced with a smile, while looking at the other person's face. The 7-star Immortal sword box? So that 7-star sword light spell is the Shi family's famous Northern Dipper killing sword disassembled into a life spell. No wonder the killing intent is so strong. Zhao Chen sighed after hearing this, and then asked, do you know his name and specific origins? Qi Fimeng shook her head and said, that part of the memory is protected by the contract. I was not careful and destroyed it. Hearing this, Zhao Chen turned his head and looked at his assistant Ming Zuling who was quietly standing by. The humanoid puppet understood immediately, and after a little thought, or search, it gave the answer. A young man named Shikong, a illegitimate branch of the Shi family, had a feud with an inner sect disciple of the Jinglian sect, one of the upper sects, half a year ago. The specific reason is unknown, but the final result was that the young man Shi was disfigured by the Jinglian demon fire, and was subsequently expelled from the family. There is no record of him after that. The Shi family actually failed to protect their own children. Even if they are illegitimate children, they shouldn't be treated like this, right? This is tantamount to showing weakness to the Jinglian sect. Zhao Chen said in surprise. Is it because they are in the wrong? And the loss is huge. Qi Fimeng said thoughtfully, according to the news from the Zheng family, the Yazhaoshi family should be the one with the most unstable status among the 12 aristocratic families, because the Shi family's Shengxuan ancestor seems to be in a very poor state, and he hasn't shown up for a long time. Hearing this, Zhao Chen asked in surprise, at a time like this, shouldn't we be tougher on the outside? Showing weakness will attract more attention, right? Yeah. So in my opinion, either the ancestor of the Shi family is fishing, or there is really a big problem, and it has reached the point where it can no longer be concealed. Zhao Chen and Qi Fimeng exchanged a few words casually, and ended the topic. After all, whether the Shi family had problems had nothing to do with them, so the two of them quickly returned their attention to the young man, whose bandages were untied. At this time, because Qi Fimeng forcibly searched his soul, the trauma of his soul became more serious, and could dissipate at any time. If this person is really Shi Kang, then it makes sense that he joined the Yinsi, and was eager to prove himself. Is this to let the family see his potential and ability and regret it? It seems that the experience of being disfigured and expelled from the family has bothered him. At this point, Zhao Chen paused for a moment, then pointed at the body of the person suspected to be Shi Kang, and asked with a smile, "Can he give it to me?" His words were not only asking Qi Fimeng, but also seeking Ming Zuling's opinion. After all, Zhao Chen promised her that he would help her collect the souls of the strong. Qi Fimeng, who knew exactly what he wanted to do, nodded and said, "You are welcome to do whatever you want." Ming Zuling said without any hesitation. He was originally the trophy of the young master. Seeing that the two had given up the ownership, Zhao Chen then sank his consciousness into the Dairi Xingcha and began to try to sell this young master Shi Kang to the Xingcha. He wanted this person because Zhao Chen was very interested in the Shi family's 7-star Immortal sword box and wanted to study it. However, this kind of family inheritance must have limitations. If you want to bypass it, you can only do it after becoming a commodity of Xingcha. Secondly, Shi Kang has a special identity, and Zhao Chen vaguely feels that the other party is likely to help him in the future. For this kind of cultivator who has not reached the realm of supernatural powers, it is not difficult for Zhao Chen, who wears the golden crow god crown, to force buying and selling. So in reality, Shi Kang soon disappeared little by little under the gaze of Qi Fimeng and Ming Zuling. Yes, at the moment of confirming the sale, Zhao Chen already knew that his real name was indeed Shi Kang, and he was indeed a bastard of the family. After selling this person, Shi Kang's identity, fate, etc. were also listed in the Jade Book, and became an item that can be exchanged. There will be more, and more identities, that can be used to take the blame in the future. Zhao Chen laughed at himself, and then withdrew from the Star Chariot. As for the other party's martial arts and Taoism, he was not too anxious. Anyway, he would get it sooner or later. Zhao Chen's mind just returned to reality, and he heard Qi Fimeng sigh helplessly. In the end, I still don't know who is calculating my position. Should we catch Ling Lao again? Zhao Chen asked with a smile. It's too dangerous, and the supernatural cultivators have too many ways to save their lives. If we fail, we will be in big trouble later. What's more, there may be a dark zone behind it. At this point, Qi Fimeng paused and said, however, we can publicize their action scheduled for tomorrow. It's just that we are insignificant, and not many people will believe it if we tell others. I fell asleep while writing 5555. Chapter 383 Avoid Disaster. No, even if we can find evidence, it should not affect the real plan of the Yinsi. Zhao Chen glanced at the assassins lying in all directions in Ming Zuling's mansion and said so. Qi Fimeng was stunned when she heard this, but then she reacted and nodded, saying, I was negligent. Since the top leaders of the Yinsi did not avoid these assassins chasing me when arranging the task and let them notice the clues, then it means that this is actually a cover and their actual purpose is hidden deeper. It is also possible that the overall situation has been decided and the Yinsi does not care whether the purpose will be noticed or not. Zhao Chen added, what exactly do they want to do? Qi Fimeng frowned, but there was too little information to infer much useful information. Zhao Chen patted her shoulder and smiled. Whatever the Yinsi wants to do, it has little to do with us. Don't bother thinking about it. We just spread the news that the Yinsi will cause chaos in Jingguan City tomorrow, so that the government can be prepared. Indeed, due to the practice, my temperament inevitably leans towards compassion, and I want to take care of everything. Fortunately, no one asked me for help this time, otherwise it would be very troublesome to refuse. Qi Meng sighed slightly. Hey, when I achieve magic power and obtain the title of Walker, I will be able to restrain similar influences. Walker? Is that the name of the title you obtained during the magic power stage? Zhao Chen's heart moved, and he asked curiously. That's right. Qi Meng nodded lightly, but didn't say anything more, and changed the subject directly. By the way, we'd better leave Jingguan City tomorrow, to avoid getting involved in trouble. Tomorrow is the beginning of the sword discussion conference, or shall we go to Locking Dragon Pond, to watch the style of the geniuses? Zhao Chen suggested with a smile. After all, there are at least 3 Dunks and Zenran present at the Locking Dragon Pond, and there are so many geniuses from various families with different levels of magical powers, so safety is guaranteed. Qi Meng hesitated for a moment, and finally shook his head and said, forget it. Without an invitation, we can't get in at all. If we stay on the periphery, it won't be much safer than in Jingguan City, and I suspect that the big group of Yanxi may be targeting the Locking Dragon Pond. It will be bad if you get caught in the crossfire, and if you follow Tang Mao into it, it will be troublesome if you are encountered by the Meng family. Do you have any evidence for your suspicion? Zhao Chen asked, his heart moved. Qi Meng shook his head, but said, it's just an intuition. Hearing this, Zhao Chen breathed a sigh of relief. He thought Qi Meng suddenly knew it again. Qi Meng seemed to remember something at this time, and smiled and said, by the way, I actually know a good place that can be used as a place to stay. What place? Zhao Chen asked curiously. Qi Meng glanced at him, and said with a smile, the little black cat in your family is in the old house in Guangnan County. I lived there for a while before, but was discovered by the killer of the underworld, so I had to leave in a hurry. I left a lot of supplies there, which was just right for recycling. In addition, although it has been abandoned for a long time, it is not too far from Jingguan City. It is perfect for temporary residence, to avoid the chaos that may happen in Jingguan City. Hearing this, Zhao Chen looked at Qi Meng a few times and asked suspiciously, that house may be hiding some secrets, right? After all, to avoid disasters, the best choice is to find a place with strong people. Even if the Yanxi may cause trouble at the sword conference, they can also go to the slightly farther Jianje directly under the town, where there are Jianje masters. Even if you take a step back, even if you just find a place to hide in Jingguan City, it is better than an abandoned house in the wilderness. Qi Meng's suggestion is completely unreasonable. Qi Meng did not answer directly, but smiled mysteriously. You will know when you get there. At this point, what else can Zhao Chen do? Of course, he agreed without hesitation. Putting aside the feelings between the two, even for the upcoming special mission, Qi Meng would not betray himself, so Zhao Chen trusted Qi Meng very much. Qi Meng was very satisfied with Zhao Chen's attitude, and said with a smile, then let's go back to Jingguan City first, hand over the information of Yanxi to Liushunman, and then rush to Guangnan County before dark. Jingguan City, inside the 6th Gate Yamen. Crossing Bin, the head of the Jinshan Constable, was leaning over his desk, flipping through the intelligence gathered about Qi Meng. He was born into a criminal family in Dunhuang, Ganzhou. His grandfather had served as the chief clerk of Sizhou. However, because he had impeached the current emperor, who was still a prince at the time, 10 years ago, his whole family was exiled to Dunhuang. This Qi Meng didn't have many abnormalities when she was a child, but in the past year she suddenly inherited a superior martial arts technique, and in just a few months she has opened at least 7 orifices. And she was also wanted for offending the famous human figure Che Yugang. Only after the charge of Che Yugang colluding with the evil spirits of Xinguang Temple was confirmed, was the charge cleared. However, Qi Meng has been missing since she was wanted, and when she reappeared, she had entered Shuzhou and was inexplicably hunted down by the Yanxi. The Yanxi has tried to capture her many times, but failed every time. Looking at the thin page of information in his hand, Crossing Bean frowned, thinking that judging from the speed of Qi Meng's cultivation, she really had a big secret. No wonder the Prince of Shu was interested in her. Yes, although Crossing Bean found out that the supernatural power at that time was not from the Prince of Shu, he firmly believed that this matter was related to him. After all, there are not many people who can make Benny Heaton so respectful. What's more, the other party sent the fairy of Huashan sect to take away the important witness. The suspicion is even greater. But where did this girl Kifi Meng go after she escaped? Hey, the people of the Shenjia are all trash. When they encounter difficult cases, they have never played any role. When crossing Jin's was cursing secretly, his consciousness suddenly noticed that there was a strange breath in the yard. Without thinking, his right hand turned into several metal blades like eagle claws. At the same time, his arm suddenly extended, allowing the eagle claws with a cold glow to break through the window at a very fast speed and grab the newcomer. But this lightning fast claw grabbed nothing and returned to the house with only a piece of letter paper. And the strange aura that could be felt just now also disappeared, as if it had never appeared. Crossing Bin's consciousness repeatedly scanned the courtyard of the Six Gates Yamen, but in the end found nothing. So, he glanced at the piece of letter paper in his hand with an unpleasant expression. Will the Yinsi cause chaos in the city tomorrow? My stomach hurts. So much for today. Chapter 384 Cornucopia. Jing'an City, in the Xianjian Pavilion, which is a residence of the Jian Pavilion. The contemporary Yaolong Jian Fulinglong, who is in charge of intelligence work, also received relevant information about the Yinsi's rebellion, but she did not take it too seriously. After all, the so-called Yinsi is just a second-rate force with a wider range in her opinion, and it is impossible to stroke the tiger whiskers of the Shangzang. Therefore, this Yaolong Jian paid more attention to another thing. The Prince of Shu intends to kidnap a girl with a special physique on the street? Mingzu Dao is really getting more and more useless. Fu Linglong, who has neat short hair, shook her head first, and then said to the jinxing Jian Tanglin beside her, but the one who ruined Mingzu Dao's good deeds is a strange supernatural power that can control the divine wind. It is suspected that he is the same person who helped Lin Yang build momentum before. Jinxing Jian Tanglin is a distant relative of Tang Mao who received Mingzu Ling before. Although she does not look outstanding, she is tall and has an excellent temperament. This Tang lady was originally responsible for entertaining the invited supernatural monks for the sword contest, but the registration had already ended, and she had a rare moment of free time, but was caught by her junior sister Fu Linglong, who helped her organize and analyze the intelligence. In other words, it was the spiritual feathered guest Lin Zuan who couldn't stand the behavior of the Prince of Shu and sent people to disrupt his good deeds. Tang Lin said in surprise, but didn't junior brother Chen say that his fellow countryman was fond of fame and easily acted on impulse? This method of hiding oneself behind the scenes is inconsistent with what junior brother Chen said. Lin Yang has reached adulthood, and his courtesy name is Zuan Hu. Brother Li also made the same judgment, and he believed that the people who helped Lin Yang build momentum were actually Zhang Rumeng's people. He wanted to use this to force Arjan Jie to give him some convenience in the sword debate conference. Fu Linglong nodded slightly and continued, and this time, the move to disrupt the plan of the Prince of Shu may also have a deeper meaning. Is there a deeper meaning? Tang Lin also frowned, and after thinking seriously, he speculated uncertainly. I heard that Mingzu Dao used the Emperor Gao Zuizi Fu Bao Chan to control the skills created by a very evil demon in the Yao Mu Academy, and named it Cheng Yang Yan Zeng Fu Yudi Junji Ji Zenjing, and Zijing Guang Yao cultivation method. But in fact it is a special dual cultivation method, which has very strict requirements on the physique and true ki of the dual cultivation women. The magical power of the great music of the yin and yang of heaven and earth mastered by Mingzu Dao has never been perfected, and he has been instructing Benny Heaton and other subordinates to collect women with various special physiques. This may also be the reason. So, could it be that the woman today is very crucial to Mingzu Dao's practice and can double the power of his magical power of the great music of the conquest of yin and yang in heaven and earth, and may even threaten Zhang Rumeng, who tried to sabotage it after finding out this. And this is a vengeance for blocking the way, and Zhang Rumeng doesn't want to bear the responsibility, so he asked the subordinate who controls the divine wind to do it. This is likely to pull the hatred onto Lin Yang, killing two birds with one stone. Dragon Sword Fu Linglong's eyes lit up when she heard it, and smiled. It's very likely. Sister Lin, it was indeed the right choice to ask you to help me analyze the intelligence. Tang Lin rolled her eyes at her and said, my reasoning is unfounded, don't take it seriously. Of course I know. but this kind of logical reasoning that is self-consistent can be taken to senior brother Gu for divination, and then we will know whether it is true or not. Fu Linglang responded with a smile. Senior brother Gu's name is Gu Shan. He is the Mon sword among the 7 swords of Jianzhi in the contemporary era. He is good at fortune telling with swords, and has the same effect as the Yi Jian of the Wan family, the relatives of the Zhuge family. If you go to senior brother Gu for everything, he will definitely be annoyed by you, so of course you have to set a threshold. Tang Lin smiled and joked, then said, but senior brother Li Crossing should be able to do this level of reasoning easily. Why don't you ask him? The sword discussion conference will start tomorrow. How can I let senior brother worry about these trivial matters? As the face of the contemporary true teachings of my Jianzhi, he is under a lot of pressure facing so many geniuses. Fu Linglang shook her head and sighed. Originally, there was senior sister Ling to share the burden, but senior sister has been in seclusion since she was sent back by that real person. I'm afraid she will never come out unless she becomes Dangzuan. Senior sister Ling's name is Ling Fihang. She is the Sky Waterfall sword among the 7 swords. She once tried to assassinate Gu Chang, the great enemy of Duan Mengsu, because she could not stand his behavior. Unfortunately, she was captured by Dangzuan Zhenren, who was protecting Gu Chang, and sent back to the giant pavilion. The other 5 swords in the 7 swords failed to cultivate first-grade magical powers, so they could not become the face of the giant pavilion and help Li Crossing share the pressure. It's a pity that Gu Chang broke senior sister Ling's heart of Tao, otherwise why would senior sister beg for life like this? Hearing this, Tang Lin also gritted his teeth, but soon he hung his head and said dejectedly, it's a pity that the great magical power of 5 emperors paying homage to the truth has been lost. Otherwise, by listening to the beauty of the great Dao and washing away the pollution caused by the broken heart of Tao, senior sister Ling would not have to try such a dangerous ritual again. Although the magical part of Brahma sound is not arrogant and joyful, natural God chapter was obtained by the Li family when Dunhuang was first published. All the major sects and families copied it as a backup, but the Dao text is difficult to translate, and interpreting the articles of the innate 5 Te is extremely dangerous. It's okay if people below Dangzuan can't translate it accurately, but Dangzuan Zhenjin and Shengzuan Zhenjin are likely to encounter Teichu Daoization in the process of translation, and directly turn into Dao evil. Therefore, there is still no translation of the Teichu true meaning. At most, some of the essence is taken and integrated into their own exercises. Otherwise, such a precious exercise would not have been obtained by the Li family. At this point, Fu Linglang's delicate face also revealed a helpless and sad look. Senior sister Ling still has to rely on herself to get through the difficulties. Yeah. Tang Lin exhaled a breath of turbid air and stopped talking about this topic and turned to talk about something else. By the way, I heard that the organization UNC has been acting rampant recently. Hey, if it weren't for the sword discussion conference being imminent, these rats should have been cleaned up long ago. Hearing this, Fu Linglang handed the information she had obtained to Tang Lin and said with a smile, then don't go to cheer for senior brother Li tomorrow. You, the Jinxing sword, will take charge of Jingguan City. Shuang Mansion, Beihua Pavilion. After listening to Fairy King Qiang's report and looking at the confession of the unlucky Feng Wantong, Mingzhu Dao, the Prince of Shu, said with a puzzled look on his face, King Qiang, do you think the 2 magical powers who fought in the South City Park are in the same group? What is the purpose of those who framed me directing and acting in such a drama? Fairy King Qiang shook her head slightly and said, I only bring back witnesses and investigation results. As for the reasons, that is your own business, not my business. Mingzhu Dao threw the confession aside and said unhappily, but the reality is that what you investigated is full of doubts, and because you brought back the magical power of the Feng family in Ningzhou, I'm more suspicious. After a pause, he gritted his teeth and said, what's more, whether it is the 2 elders Lingming or Bei Heaton, they have lost contact with me, which means they are all dead, and you have not completed the commission. I can't help it. Who would have thought that those people would be killed so quickly? Fairy King Qiang said innocently. Forget it. After they died, I asked someone to do divination, but I couldn't even figure out their corpses. I'm afraid the origins of those people are not small. Mingzhu Dao rubbed his forehead. As for taking the blame, Anyway, my reputation is like this, and I don't lack this one. Fairy Xingcha was delighted, and hurriedly said, then the 10,000 shares promised to me before. But before she finished speaking, she was interrupted by Mingzu Dao. Do you think your achievements are worthy of the 10,000 shares of spiritual crystals? Fairy Xingcha did not feel guilty at all, and responded immediately, worthy. Mingzu Dao didn't know what to say for a moment, and finally he could only shake his head and said, I'll give you half first. As for the rest, let's talk about it after you find and capture the girl named Qifi Meng. After all, this girl is the only flaw revealed by their group. Fairy Xingcha, who knew that she was in the wrong, decided to stop while she was ahead and had no intention of continuing to make trouble. After thinking about it, she asked, what if the girl was just an irrelevant person they caught casually? Then Qifi Meng's improvement speed is so rapid, and she is being chased by hired killers. She must have an extraordinary origin. Such a person could not have been caught casually. The Prince of Shu said with narrowed eyes. I can help you investigate Qifi Meng, but I won't be able to attend the swordsman conference tomorrow. Fairy Xingcha hugged Mingzu Dao's arm and said coquettishly, I've paid so much, won't you compensate me a little more? You can't even beat me, why bother to humiliate yourself at the swordsman conference? Didn't you listen to the analysis of that Lin Yang's stooge? You, me and Shen-Tians of the 10,000 Beasts sect are all just foils for this conference. There's no hope at all. The Prince of Shu sneered, then pulled Fairy Xingcha into his arms and continued, however, I will definitely give you the compensation you deserve. Xingcha, you should believe me on this point. Fairy Xingcha then broke away from Mingzu Dao's arms with satisfaction and complimented him. That's true for Shen-Tians and me, but you're different. The power of your heaven and earth yin and yang interaction great compassion ode may not have been as powerful as the first grade before, but after these years of improvement, I'm afraid it will no longer be faster than other great magical powers. Xingcha, you also contributed to this. The Prince of Shu did not refute, but said confidently, this time, Lin Yang, Zhang Rumeng and others will definitely be surprised. Guangnan County, Gong's old house. As soon as Zhao Chen, who was holding Qifi Meng and using the Godspeed spell to hurry on his way, approached here, he felt some movement in the Great Sun Star Raft. He immediately slowed down his pace, separated part of his energy to outline the phantom of the Nine Lights gold seal in his mind, and his consciousness entered the Star Raft. Sitting on the 6th dragon throne, Zhao Chen cast his eyes towards the source of the movement, that is, the 8 diagrams bright light mirror on the desk. He saw that the compass on the outside of this bronze mirror was constantly rotating, indicating that Star Raft accessories appeared within his 10-mile range. So this is the surprise Fei Meng was talking about? There are actually accessories for the Star Raft hidden in this abandoned house. As his thoughts turned, Zhao Chen left the mist-shrouded palace in the Star Raft in surprise and joy, and looked at Fei Meng who hooked her arm around his neck. The little girl's telepathy ability obviously noticed Zhao Chen's thoughts, and she smiled and said, what do you think? Am I right? Did you know it as soon as you got here? Zhao Chen looked at the abandoned house so close, and gradually stopped. After putting Fei Meng down, he reached out and scratched her nose and said, you really gave me a big surprise. I never thought there would be a Star God's treasure here. No wonder you had to come back here to avoid the disaster. In fact, if the Yinzi really has a big move, their best choice is to immediately take Mingzuling, Zhao Royan, Zhao Fu and others back to Ganzhou, which is the safest. But in that case, Tang Mao's absence from the sword discussion conference without reason will inevitably arouse the suspicion of the Tang family. At that time, it will be bad to send Shen Tang or even Dang Xuan to Human to investigate in person. The Star God relics here is just one of the reasons. In fact, I asked you to come here with me, and I also wanted to temporarily stay away from Zhao Royan and Zhao Fu. After all, if we keep following the person behind Zhao Royan, the blood sword Zheng Zhao Zenran who came out of the worry-free cave heaven, may not show up easily. Qifi Meng said with a smile. Before his father died, Zhao Royan asked her to find the blood sword. Now that he has said this, it will not be aimless. Maybe that senior has been following us in some way, but we didn't notice it. Zhao Chen said thoughtfully. Even the jade slip given by Zenrankin in the cave heaven did not react. That's why I wanted to test it. Qi Meng added with a smile. So there was a reason why you asked me about the jade slip the other day. Zhao Chen's face showed a look of realization, and then he did not continue the topic. Instead, he looked at the house with only a few intact houses left, and asked carefully, the original Gong family was coveted, because of the star god relic, which led to its decline, right? I guess so. Qi Meng nodded. However, the Gong family was not a big family, and those who dealt with them were just local tyrants. It is very likely that they don't even know the existence of the star god relic. They just want to get the secret of the Gong family's sudden wealth. As she said, she led the way and walked into the yard. Is the secret the star god relic? No one has come to look for it since they wiped out the Gong family? Zhao Chen asked curiously while following Fei Meng's footsteps. They wanted to dig deep into the ground. Unfortunately, your little black cat just landed nearby. Although she failed to save the fleeing Gong sisters, she used their identities to help them avenge and destroy the local tyrant family with only a few refining warriors. Is that so? I didn't expect there was such a connection. Zhao Chen nodded and continued to ask, so, what is that treasure? The cornucopia. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 385 Koi, Cornucopia, as a feng shui ornament for bringing in wealth and breeding fortune, is actually very common in Daxia. Like the golden toad and lucky cat, it is loved by many merchants. It is said that this thing has existed since ancient times. After thousands of years, it has become a symbol of some kind. In this world, where extraordinary power is manifested, it can indeed play a certain role. However, because there are so many people using it, the effect is just like that, and it will not really affect the overall fortune. However, this is not the point. The point is that among the lost accessories of Xingcha listed in the Jade Book, there is nothing like the cornucopia. Although Zhao Chen was a little surprised, he did not think that Qi Meng was wrong. After all, the Xingcha accessories have been lost for many years, and it is not impossible that they have been recast by masters and the style has been changed. Especially some of them have no fixed shape and specifications. According to my investigation, the Gong family is not a native of Guangnan County. They were originally just the leaders of a small gang that relied on taking on projects and building various buildings. But after helping a village in Guangnan County build a bluestone tower to ward off evil spirits, they suddenly bought land in this village, became naturalized, and built the current mansion. This almost drained all the savings of the Gong family at the time. After entering the mansion, Qi Meng led the way and told the information she knew. In other words, the Gong family was originally a contractor on a construction site. In addition, a building like a bluestone tower has no practical use. At most, it can only make people feel at ease and stop them from thinking too much. However, since the villagers want to build an expensive bluestone tower, it means that there may be some problems in this village at the time, but the problems are not obvious, and the people in the government office did not find anything unusual. Zhao Chen speculated. That's right. Qi Meng nodded casually and continued. I went into the county government office and took a peek at the county annals. According to the records, Jinli village had poor harvests for 10 consecutive years and the catch was pitifully small. But other nearby villages were very normal during those 10 years. The Daoist government sent a slayer to investigate the cause, but found nothing. They could only conclude that the feng shui of Jinli village might not be good. So, the wealthy families in Jinli village paid to build the bluestone tower. What happened later? Did the fortune of Jinli village improve? Zhao Chen asked. Qi Meng shook his head and said, after the bluestone tower was built, it didn't have any effect at the time. The good luck of Jinli village only improved after the Gong family settled here and built the current mansion. According to the county annals, Jinli village had a bumper harvest in the first year that the Gong family settled down. After that, no matter what kind of cash crops were planted in the village that year, they would become bestsellers. And the Gong family's various investments have never failed. They went straight from the brink of bankruptcy to becoming one of the richest families in Guangnan County. But compared with the real wealthy families in the county, the Gong family's foundation is still too poor. Hearing this, Zhao Chen sighed and said, the Gong family rose too quickly and lacked the deterrent power of force, so they were naturally coveted. If they were pure businessmen, they would have the protection of the government. But the Gong family came from a gang, so there should be some key realm cultivators in the family, right? In this way, the government will not easily intervene in the fights between people who practice cultivation, just like the fight between several martial arts schools and escort agencies for the trade route with us in the past. It will be resolved according to the rules of the rivers and lakes. Having said this, Zhao Chen paused and asked puzzledly, but even so, it will not bring disaster to the whole family. How could the Gong family end up like this? Qi Fimeng pointed to the mansions around, which were shabby, but still revealed a bit of luxury, and smiled. Everything has a price. The same goes for good luck. When your fortune turns bad, it's not surprising to encounter local tyrants who are greedy and unscrupulous. Misfortunes often come with blessings, and blessings often come with misfortunes. Zhao Chen sighed inwardly, and looked around at the dilapidated houses and the even more desolate abandoned village outside the house. He had some guesses about the true face of the so-called cornucopia. Even if your little black cat took over the identities of the two daughters of the Gong family and helped them to avenge their revenge, it could not reverse the increasingly declining fate of Jinli village. The villagers still insisted at first, but after 2 years of no harvest, they were completely desperate and left here one after another. The Dao official office later sent people to investigate again, but unfortunately still found nothing. They finally believed that the Gong family used a certain treasure to hold a ceremony to gather wealth, but the ceremony backfired, and that treasure may have been taken away by someone. But in fact, it has always been there, but no one has discovered it. While Qi Fimeng was speaking, she had already taken Zhao Chen into the master bedroom in the backyard, and this was where she had retreated to break through the 9 apertures and escaped from the pursuit of the Yanxi before. The tunnel entrance opened with a mechanism was still open. No one has discovered it. Is it hidden secretly, or can only be discovered by certain people or methods? Zhao Chen asked thoughtfully. He was more inclined to the latter, and that thing must be difficult to move, otherwise the people in the Daoguan office would not have failed to discover it, and the Gong family would not have had to build a house here in the first place. I guess it was a certain person. Qi Fimeng said with a smile. After all, I also vaguely sense the breath of the star god through the portrait of the Bodhisattva, and the Gong family is unlikely to have something of this level. If it really existed, they would not have been easily exterminated. In other words, the source of the Gong family's bloodline is related to the star god. Zhao Chen was not too surprised by this. After all, the little black cat, as an alternative incarnation created by the spirit of Cheyenne blessed land, descended near the 2 sisters of the dead Gong family on the first day of the new year, which was already very telling. Even the owner of the spirit of Cheyenne blessed land, Star River True Lord, might have the surname Gong. As his thoughts turned, Zhao Chen had already jumped into the tunnel with Qi Fimeng. Since the traps here had been cleared by the people from the Yanxi last time, the two walked smoothly. After about 4 or 5 minutes, they came to a fork in the road, where they could hear the sound of water. The Gong family discovered the so-called treasure bowl when they built the tower on the river bank, so that thing is nearby. Come with me. After saying that, Qi Fimeng took Zhao Chen to the left and entered a cave that looked like a warehouse. However, the things inside had long been emptied, leaving only a few broken boxes and an inconspicuous stone platform in the corner. The stone platform was in the shape of a basin, with a hemispherical depression on the surface. From a distance, it looked like a clay wash basin, completely inconspicuous. But when Zhao Chen approached, a magical scene emerged in his eyes. He saw the basin sparkling, as if the sun was shining in, and shining with golden light. And several koi were swimming in this basin, with graceful postures, like butterflies jumping in the water. Their bodies are colorful, some golden, some bright red, some pure white, all kinds of colors intertwined together, against the backdrop of golden waves, like a beautiful painting, which makes people unable to look away at first sight. Just when Zhao Chen was lost in thought, Qi Meng's voice came into his ears. But what did you find? There is another chapter into chapters later. Update progress. 1/10. Chapter 386 Fate. Zhao Chen came back to his senses and asked for confirmation. Can't you see those koi in the basin? So there are living things in it? No wonder the Gong family could only build a house to cover it up. I'm afraid they can only see it, but can't really touch it, and there is no way to move it. Qi Meng nodded thoughtfully. After thinking for a while, he said carefully, in my eyes, it's just a natural stone basin. In addition, you need to summon the portrait of Bodhisattva to vaguely feel some of the magic. These koi symbolize fate, and fate is illusory, so it is invisible? No. Most of the divination related magical powers are peeping into fate. If it is really invisible, there will be no related magical powers. So, this koi actually symbolizes a part of fate or luck that can be traded, right? TSK, this fate pond is quite creative. It actually conjured up a pot of koi, so as to give a concrete image to the originally illusory fate. Yes, at this time, Zhao Chen has determined that the so-called treasure bowl in front of him is the fate pond that Xingcha lost. For some reason, it was combined with the stone basin in front of him, and a basin of fate koi, or god of wealth fish was born. This treasure bowl seems to allow people to borrow the good luck and wealth contained in the basin by fishing, which will greatly increase their luck for a long period of time, and everything will go well. But the borrowed luck must be repaid after all, and the interest is probably quite high. That's why the Gong family declined rapidly after a brief period of glory, and even suffered a tragic annihilation. Even the entire Jinli village was greatly implicated. Of course, this is only a superficial function. As for what specific effect it has, we have to put it into the star chariot for research. With this thought, Zhao Chen looked at Qi Meng. He didn't say anything, but his meaning was very clear. Help me protect the law. Qi Meng knew from the initial Mirror Village incident that Erlang could collect the Star God's relics, so he was not surprised, and nodded happily. Okay. Zhao Chen took a deep breath, stretched out his right hand, and put it into the water waves in the stone basin that seemed to be filled with sunlight. With the touch of Zhao Chen's palm, in an instant, not only the sparkling pool water, but also the many koi in it, and the stone basin carrying this pool of fate water completely disappeared. At the same time, in the Great Sun Star Chariot, a huge treasure basin inlaid with various precious gems and metal decorations, which was dazzling, appeared in the palace hall shrouded in mist. This basin is more than 1 meter high and 3 meters in diameter, and many fine patterns are engraved on the edge of the spout. These patterns include carp that symbolizes luck, cats that attract wealth, and golden toads that foretell good luck, giving people an incomparable sense of preciousness and mystery. Zhao Chen, whose spirit followed into the star chariot, did not care about the changes in the jade book at first, but stood up directly, walked down the stairs, and came to the magnificent palace hall. Because with the arrival of this treasure basin, the fog inside the sun star chariot receded again, and a door leading to an unknown place was vaguely revealed behind the left column. And this treasure basin containing the fateful heavenly pond stood on the side of the door. Is this a new map? Zhao Chen complained, walked straight to the door, and observed it carefully. This door is made of unknown materials, and the surface is covered with complex carvings, depicting symbols and totems that Zhao Chen has never seen before. Although he couldn't understand it, the terrifying power implied in it made him dare not even reach out to touch it. The handle of this door is inlaid with a colorful gem, which flickered strangely in the faint mist. There is a regular and peculiar groove on the surface of the gem, which looks like a keyhole. In other words, you have to find the key to this door before you can enter it safely. A hint of enlightenment emerged in Zhao Chen's mind. Perhaps there are many such doors hidden in the star raft. To open them, we need another lost accessory of the star raft, the key of morning light. But the treasure that originally belonged to the Zhuge family has been stolen by the god of evil and brought into history by him. Wait. I remember that the relevant books of the Li family mentioned that the key of morning light is equivalent to the master key to enter the door of history. Could it be that behind these doors in the star raft, there is also a certain history? If so, it is no wonder that the star god's relics can be used to bring about the historical fog. I'm afraid the historical fog itself is inseparable from the star god, or the great sun star aft. It's a pity that the key of morning light is not in my hand, otherwise I could verify it. After sighing regretfully, Zhao Chen suppressed the idea of trying to push open the door, and instead focused his attention on the cornucopia at the door, which had completely changed its appearance, as if it had changed into a Krypton gold collector skin. TSK, this appearance is worthy of the name Fateful Lake. Did you make a sticker after returning to Star Chariot in order not to be looked down upon by other colleagues? Zhao Chen complained, and then carefully studied the functions of this fateful lake at the current stage. Soon, he completed the communication and obtained its detailed data. First of all, as Zhao Chen expected, this fateful lake has the function of lending fate, and it can also be subdivided into 3 types: wealth, good luck and luck. Although these 3 fates also overlap with each other, the focus is different. Wealth naturally tends to increase wealth, but the concept of wealth itself can also be very large, which varies from person to person. Ordinary people or low-level monks will only get the corresponding currency, or gold and silver, when they get fortune. But for Zhao Chen, everything that can be exchanged for star coins is wealth. Good luck focuses on the degree of success in doing something, but if it is to make money, then the function overlaps with fortune, although the implementation mechanism is different. The last luck is the most comprehensive of the 3 fates of lending, but also the most dangerous. Because if the first 2 cannot smoothly return the principal and interest, in most cases the backlash will not be fatal, but luck is different. Once it cannot be repaid within the agreed time, the luck of the person who borrows luck himself, and even the luck of the people around him will be reduced. Once the luck is low to a certain level, there will naturally be a disaster of overthrow. 2 in 1 failed. There is another chapter behind. Chapter 387 Investigator. The Gong family probably borrowed luck from the fateful lake, which made everything go smoothly for them, and made them rich in a short time. But they either didn't know that they had to pay back this luck, or they simply couldn't pay it back, which led to the end of their family's destruction. Of course, for Zhao Chen, the backlash of borrowing luck is not so terrible. After all, he can use star coins to compensate for his luck. TSK, 10% interest, and it's compound interest. I can't use the borrowed luck to make a mana master in the family within the agreed time. I can't pay it back at all. After all, those in the mana realm must have a talisman position on them, not to mention their own long luck. As long as they have the strength, they can slowly recover any lost luck. But even if it is a cultivator with mana, after paying back the luck fee, he will still be seriously injured and be plagued by bad luck for a while, and may even be killed by his enemies. Fortunately, when I want to use this treasure bowl, I don't have to rely on fishing to open blind boxes like the Gong family, but I can borrow any one I want, and I can also sell my usual corresponding fate to accumulate, and then redeem it all at once. In addition, I can also store bad luck, misfortune, calamity and other destinies in the cornucopia, and it will produce corresponding fish. If you wear the golden crow crown, you can even strip the corresponding luck or bad luck from others and store it. When you need it, you can solidify it into an object. As long as others get it, they will get the corresponding fortune. It seems that this so-called fate pond is more like a fate bank, with savings, loans, and even trust businesses. No wonder the Stars Club always preaches that Star God has come to the world, and fate is unpredictable. If the Star God can do this, then everyone's fate will be disrupted, and impermanence will be a matter of course. Well, it's not just the fate of people. When I get more authority, I can also mortgage and borrow the fate of the country and even the world. This kind of playing with fate must be a first-class great supernatural power. It is rumored that the Zhuge family also has similar means, but I don't know how the effect is different from the Fate Lake. As his thoughts turned, Zhao Chen thought of some games that use other Star-Aft accessories to link with the Fate Lake. For example, when borrowing luck from the Fate Lake, a loan contract must be signed, but the content of the contract can be interfered with by the 16 gold Star Libra sword. At least with Zhao Chen's current authority, although it is not possible to do it without interest, it is still possible to strive for low interest without compounding. For example, when using the 8 diagrams bright light mirror to calculate or shield the calculation, if you get lucky luck first, the cost remains unchanged, but the effect can be increased several times. There are so many examples. It can only be said that the connection between the various accessories of the star raft is very close, and it is easy to combine the abilities. Zhao Chen guessed that the abilities displayed by these so-called star raft accessories might be the manifestation of the abilities brought by the talisman at a high level. The Jade Book is the general outline, which has all the abilities, but the abilities are weakened when the corresponding accessories are missing. After studying the cornucopia containing the fateful heavenly pond again, Zhao Chen returned to the main seat of the palace and sat on the 6th dragon throne. Then, he picked up the 9 lights gold seal and opened the Jade Book again and began to explore what changes had taken place here after the star raft accessories were recycled. Well, as before, the phantom engraved by the 9 lights gold seal has been transformed into the name of the 7th grade talisman, and I can also experience, in advance, the weakened version of some of the 7th grade talisman abilities. Thinking so in his heart, Zhao Chen's eyes were firmly locked on the content displayed by the phantom 7th grade talisman, Star Elm Collector. Of course, although this name sounds high sounding, just like Xing Transportation Deputy Envoy to Traveling Merchant and Xing Zhao Guardian Envoy to Escort, Xingji Collection Envoy also has an easy to understand, but not very auspicious alias, Investigator. Although we don't know what the specific abilities of this position are, just by listening to the name, we know that it must be related to investigating secrets and collecting knowledge. And Zhao Chen only has one experience ability in advance, that is translation. This ability allows him to interpret the meaning of some Dao texts by himself, and the defense ability of the Xing Zhao Guardian Envoy stage has been strengthened to a certain extent, extending from the physical level to the spiritual level, which can resist pollution to a certain extent. In this world, where knowledge is poisonous, collecting wind is also a dangerous job. Zhao Chen complained, not too curious about the newly acquired experience ability. After all, he had already used the Jade Book to experience it. However, he soon discovered to his surprise that the classics he had translated with his ability could be exchanged for the Xingcha translation from the Jade Book at a certain discount. The specific discount depends on the quality of his translation. Unlike other interpreters, my translation ability essentially seems to be an erosion of the source of the Dao Wen. Of course, with my current strength, the effect achieved is minimal, and I can only be polluted and eroded. But when I reach a high level, it may not be the case. At least I can get some shares of the source of some classics. This should be the main reason why the practice I practice is very compatible with the Xingcha Lu. Because of practicing the Xingcha translation, although the Teichu true meaning has not changed, the source is no longer just Teichu Daojin. Finally, after I translated it, the Jade Book gave me a discount. Does that mean it recognizes that I and Xingcha are actually one? At least it recognizes on the surface. Jinggadan City, in the private room of the Zhu family restaurant. As it was getting late, Meng Zuling, who had transformed into the appearance of Tang Mao, was ready to rest. However, before taking care of her body, she habitually used her spiritual sense to scan Zhao Royan and Zhao Fu in another private room. Because of the hasty departure, Zhao Chen handed the 2 little friends he brought with him to Meng Zuling to take care of, and she took the 2 to participate in the sword conference tomorrow. Seeing that there was nothing unusual, Meng Zuling was about to return to the space she built with the mansion technique to clean her body with a special detergent. But at this moment, a jade slip in her arm suddenly moved and trembled violently. Is this the jade slip that Master Chen gave me before he left? It has this reaction. Is the blood god sword that Royan is looking for here? Chapter 388 Men in Black. In another luxurious private room on the top floor of Zujia building, Zhao Royan sat alone in front of the dressing mirror and combed her freshly washed hair. Speaking of which, before the disaster of exterminating her family, although she practiced martial arts diligently under the arrangement of her father, she was also a spoiled young lady. Things like combing her hair were all done by maids, and she had never done it herself. The level of practitioners in Shuzhou is indeed much higher than that of Ganzhou, and even Liangzhou is not as good as here, and tomorrow's sword discussion conference is an excellent opportunity. If I can be noticed by giant or other major sects, I will be promoted to heaven in one step. Before the real sword discussion of various sects, there are naturally competitions in the out-of-body and gangsha groups as a change, which gives many casual practitioners a stage to show themselves. My hope is not great. But Brother Zhao is the reincarnation of Dongsuan Zenran and a sword cultivator, so he is likely to be noticed by the masters of Jianzhou. Maybe I can follow him and gain the power of revenge. Zhao Royan muttered to herself silently. After the pollution in her soul was removed, the reason why the little girl was so close to Zhao Fu was not only because she really had a good impression of him, but also because she intuitively felt Zhao Fu's power in his previous life in her dream. In her eyes, this is the key to her revenge for her father. After all, the blood sword that her father asked her to find did not have any clues at all, and the breaking delusion Nigong Zia who took refuge was only a cultivator in the Gangsha realm, and was unable to help her revenge. As for the blood shadow divine art translated by Master Zhuanchen, although it was her reliance on strengthening herself, her progress was too slow. What's more, the skills in her hands were still incomplete, and she could only cultivate to the realm of mana at most. According to what the Blood Sword young master said, there must be many real people in the underworld organization. It is so difficult to avenge my father and eradicate this organization. Just when Zhao Royan was lost in thought, she suddenly heard a strange noise coming from the direction of the window. She subconsciously turned her head and was shocked to see a thin man in black standing in front of the window, looking at her intently. "Who are you?" Zhao Royan immediately asked loudly, hoping to alert Zhao Fu who was resting outside, and the female hero Tang Mao who was on the same floor. However, her action did not achieve the desired effect. Instead, the man in black shook his body and walked towards her step by step. After all, Zhao Royan was a cultivator who had cultivated true ki. Seeing such a situation, she instantly realized that the newcomer had blocked the entire room with magic, and simple sounds should not be able to be transmitted. She took a deep breath and forced herself to calm down. Then, with a clang sound, the long sword was unsheathed and pointed directly at the newcomer. A faint flash of blood flashed on the sword. Although Zhao Royan had not practiced the blood shadow divine art for a long time, because Zhao Chen, Gong Yun, and even Zhao Fu took the time to guide her, the true Ki realm swordsmanship simplified from the spell Red Blood Demon Sword was already considered an entry. Seeing her in this posture, the man in black stopped and laughed. "Haha," said, "at this distance, you girls still can't feel the connection between you and me?" "Connection?" Zhao Royan frowned. She did feel a certain inexplicable sense of familiarity coming from the other person, but she had no idea what it was. The man in black shook his head at this and further guided. "Before your father died, he asked you to find the blood sword, right? How do you know?" Zhao Royan was shocked when she heard this. This was a secret hidden in her heart, and only Zhao Fu, who had entered her dream, knew something vaguely. Of course, Zhao Chen took the opportunity to interpret the text and use the Kaizi control heart method to guide her to tell the secret, so Zhao Royan naturally didn't remember it. But soon, Zhao Royan reacted and asked with half caution and half surprise, "Are you the so-called blood sword?" "I'm both the blood sword and not the blood sword." The man in black smiled and continued, "It seems that you really don't know anything. Well, it's better not to know." Having said that, the expression of the man in black suddenly became serious, and he warned, "I'm here this time to remind you. Don't go to the sword fighting competition in Lock Dragon Pond tomorrow. There will soon be a big chaos there." "What chaos? Why should I listen to you?" Zhao Royan asked in surprise. "You can listen or not. I'm reminding you just to follow my heart and fulfill my obligation. As for how you choose, that's your problem." The man in black shook his head lightly, then stretched out his hand and pointed a blood red light into the center of Zhao Royan's eyebrows. "This is the complete blood shadow divine art. When you achieve the magical power, I will come to find you again. Before that, you have to learn to protect yourself." The man in black said, and before Zhao Royan could digest the information that had been poured into his mind, he turned around and left. However, he had just taken a step when he turned back and said again, "By the way, you'd better stay away from that Mr. Chen. The cause and effect entanglement in him is so deep that even I feel scared." After giving this instruction, the man in black did not stop, but turned into bloodlight and went out through the window. However, the moment he went out of the window, the surrounding scene suddenly changed, and a layer of sticky crimson moonlight also blocked the bloodlight he turned into. The man in black stumbled out of the bloodlight and took a look at the space around him that suddenly changed, like a laboratory. He looked calm and did not seem to feel much surprise. At this time, an emotionless female voice sounded. "The blood droplet separated from the blood demon's immortal body? I prefer to be called the son of the blood god." The man in black raised the corner of his mouth, looked at the stunning fairy who appeared in the laboratory space, and said with a smile, "Fairyling, we meet again." He did not try to escape. After all, this son of the blood god clone was only at the Gangsha realm. Even if the realm was high, it was impossible for him to escape from the space constructed by the magical power. Meng Zuling frowned upon hearing this, and searched the database for a long time, but could not find any intersection with the other party, so he asked in confusion, "Have we met?" "The one who met you, fairy, was another avatar of the blood god son, but in essence it was me." The man in black smiled faintly and reminded, "Back then in Yanshan City, Ganzhou, if it weren't for me, it wouldn't have been so easy for you to get the golden crow crown, right?" Upon hearing this, Meng Zuling's eyes condensed, and then he reacted, staring into the eyes of the man in black and said, "The leader of the Vlad family also has your blood droplet hidden in his body? You deliberately led the topic to the means of dealing with the Sakura dragon fairy, so that Shike took out the magic weapon, and gave me the opportunity to steal it? That cotton lad was already on the verge of madness at the time, and I didn't dare to control him directly, I just gave him some small hints." The man in black smiled and said, "In addition, the reason why you got the divination result, that the golden crow crown can bring you great opportunities, is also because I made some small interference." There is another chapter later. Chapter 389, Locking Dragon Pond. Interfering with the results of my divination. Meng Zuling showed surprise on his face and asked, "Why?" "Shike of the moon worship sect tried to take my magic weapon and kill my descendants. Naturally, I can't let him continue to live, and I can't get away, so I can only use the hands of others to accomplish it." The man in black explained with a smile, and then said, "However, the fact that you can get a great opportunity by getting the golden crow crown is not completely fictitious. It's just that this opportunity will be provided by me." As he said, he sighed slightly, and added, "I won't lie to you, I originally planned to default, but after you and that young Master Chen were involved, I didn't dare to do so. I took the initiative to come to your door this time. In addition to reminding my younger generations, the main purpose is to see you. Fate is really strange. In other words, my previous feeling was correct. Only by joining Master Chen's team can you get the opportunity." Meng Zuling was stunned. He was not in a hurry to get his own opportunity. Instead, he followed Zhao Chen's instructions and asked something else. "Your true form is the blood sword Zhengzhao, right?" The man in black narrowed his eyes slightly after hearing this question. After carefully examining Meng Zuling, he asked instead of answering, "You are carrying Kinya's token. Was it given to you by Master Chen?" Meng Zuling did not comment, but took out the jade slip and showed it to the man in black. This was with Zhao Chen's permission. "With Kinya's condition, it is impossible for her to come out from there," the man in black said. His spiritual sense swept across the jade slip, and a look of realization suddenly appeared on his face. "So that's it. That blood sword young master is even more complicated than I thought. It seems that my choice to avoid him has been correct." After a pause, the black-clothed man's consciousness actually enveloped the jade slip and temporarily unlocked the many restrictions on it, and engraved something inside it. After he finished doing all this, he looked at Meng Zuling and said, "You hand this jade slip over to Blood Sword Young Master, and tell him that he can go back to Kinya to report. In addition, I don't want to have too much communication with him, so please forgive me." After speaking, he took out a booklet from his arms, handed it to Meng Zuling and said, "If I'm not mistaken, your basic magical power should be Senluo Wangxiang. This magical power comes from the Star God, but what you are practicing is not the complete version. You only have the omnipotent power of Senluo Wangxiang, which can imitate other magical powers, but it does not have its circulating creative power. And I have a friend here who has practiced the complete version of this magical power. Although your foundation has been established, and it is difficult to change, it is still of great help to your Dangsuan path. For you, this can be regarded as a great opportunity. Facing the booklet handed over, Meng Zuling hesitated a little, but soon took it with relief, and only asked a new question. What kind of trouble will happen at the sword discussion conference? She will also attend this event tomorrow morning, so of course she has to ask clearly. Who would have thought that the man in black would answer the question irrelevantly? I can only say that the cultivators with magical power should be able to protect themselves if they are careful. Can the cultivators with magical powers only protect themselves? Will there be a Dangsuan battle? Meng Zuling wanted to continue asking, but the man in black shook his head and said, I can't reveal more, otherwise we will probably be discovered and killed. I don't care. After all, it's just a body temporarily occupied by the son of the blood god, but you and my descendant. He didn't finish his words, but his meaning was clearly conveyed to Meng Zuling. Meng Zuling was silent for a few seconds, then released the exit of the space. The figure of the man in black immediately disappeared, leaving only a question in Meng Zuling's ear. Why is the dragon locking pond called Dragon Locking Pond? Guangnan County, in the tunnel of the Gong family's old house. Zhao Chen, who had received the fateful heaven pond, had not had time to tell Fei Meng about his new ability before he received a report from Meng Zuling and learned about the visit of Zhengzhao Zhenren. Since Meng Zuling had signed a contract, he could be considered as his dependent, so he could use the Star Chariot to contact him in time. Meng Zuling's questions were basically asked under Zhao Chen's instructions. Why did Zhenren Zhengzhao keep avoiding me? It's like I'm a plague god. Zhao Chen was puzzled, and Qinya Zhenren, who was also a blood god in the cave, took the initiative to stick to him. Hearing this, Qi Meng rolled his eyes at Zhao Chen and said with a smile, I guess he has some plans of his own, and there are always various things around you. If he has more contact with you, it will be easy for some of his secrets to be exposed. As for Master Qinya, her path has been ruined. If there is no great variable, she can only wait for the day when she disappears completely little by little. And you are entangled in various causes and conditions, which is exactly the variable she has been dreaming of, so she naturally took the initiative to stick to you. Qi Meng, who has Qinsheng as the unit 2, knows the latter point very well. In other words, Master Zhengzhao, the blood sword, dislikes me for being a troublemaker. Zhao Chen was unhappy, but he didn't say much, and turned to discuss the last hint given by Master Zhengzhao. Why is Locking Dragon Pond called Locking Dragon Pond? What does this mean? Could it be that there is really a real dragon locked in that pond? Qi Meng said thoughtfully, it's not impossible. I've always wondered why the hostility between Zhao and Zheng family is so deep. Even if the ideas are different, it shouldn't be to the point where Zheng family members dare not enter Shu and Zhao disciples dare not go to the East China Sea. If Zhao really imprisoned a real dragon transformed by Zheng family members, it would make sense. Hearing Qi Meng's words, Zhao Chen asked in surprise, does King Gan also know some inside information? Qi Meng shook her head. The dragon locking pond has existed for at least 300 years, and Zheng King Gan doesn't know much about it. And as far as she knows, most people in the Zheng family don't know much about Shuzhao. This is normal. Zheng family members can't enter Shu, so they naturally won't deliberately investigate. Combined with the information we got before, the real target of the underworld is likely to be in the dragon locking pond. Zhao Chen made a guess after a little thought. That Zhengzhao Zhenren is likely to want to make some use of this incident. This may be the opportunity for him to return to the realm of Zhenren. That's why he didn't want to tell us in detail. Qi Meng added. Fortunately, we are hiding in the ruins of Jinli village. No matter how big the chaos in Sualongtan is, it shouldn't affect us. Well, I'll give myself another luck later. What about your assistant? She said she still wants to attend the sword fighting competition. Chapter 390 Under the Locking Dragon Pond. You still want to go, even though you know there's great danger? Qi Meng asked in surprise. She seems to be very stubborn. She said that, since I want her to play the role of Tang Mao well, she can't not attend the swordsmanship contest just because there's danger. Otherwise she will definitely be suspected afterwards. Zhao Chen shook his head helplessly and added, fortunately, she and I have signed a contract. Even if she encounters irresistible danger, I can guarantee her a glimmer of hope. TSK, I heard that this lucky artificial man has been pursuing to become a real human. But among humans, few can do this. Qi Meng couldn't help but marvel at the words, and then deliberately said, she cares so much about you, you have to be nicer to her in the future. Zhao Chen suddenly had the illusion that the person in front of him had become Zheng Qinggan. He glanced at Qi Meng and thought to himself, girl, you can't be so schizophrenic that you are affected by the incarnation, right? Lock Dragon Pond is located about 500 miles northwest of Jingguan City. It is hidden by waterfalls in deep valleys and magpie forests. The sound of water is hoarse, the clear water is vast, and the Tingxi is beautiful and graceful. It is like an unmarried dragon girl locked in a deep boudoir, ashamed to see people, which is particularly intriguing. However, this is just an appearance. In fact, behind the waterfall, under the clear water, there is another world, a mirror world, that only exists in the reflection of the water. At this time, in the mirror world, the water in the pond has long been surging, as if it was boiling. A 5-clawed dragon at least 100 meters long kept rolling and tossing, trying to break free from the chains shining with dense divine patterns on its body, and the 9 pillars connecting these chains. But no matter how it moves, it only stirs up the water in the mirror world, and can't do anything about the shackles that trap it. At this time, 2 figures suddenly appeared in the pool. One of them was an old man with white hair and beard. He glanced at the twisting dragon with an indifferent look and said, this evil dragon will do this every time before and after the sword fighting competition. It is really determined. Next to the old man was a boy who was less than 3 feet tall, but the boy's head was very big, occupying a full foot of height, which was very disproportionate to the body. The big-headed boy sneered and said, oh, do you think it is really a beast? It was originally a fairy with a charming demeanor and many suitors. It was only because of the Taoism that it degenerated into a Tao evil and became what it is now. Of course it can calculate when the seal of this lock dragon pool is the weakest. Not to mention that this time the weak period is advanced. Everyone thinks that the sword fighting competition held every 3 years in my Jianzhen is to make our young disciples famous, but in fact, that is only a small part of the reason. The real purpose is to use the concept of fighting and sword fighting and the power of the magic circle covering desire to strengthen the seal on this evil dragon. The white-haired old man sighed here and continued, the evil spirits at the level of great evil are difficult to kill completely, and it is also extremely troublesome to seal them. This is also the most labor-saving method. Hey, Lao, you don't have to explain this to me. Although something went wrong when I reincarnated and became what I'm now, my memories are still there. The boy shook his head and continued with a smile. Although the sect had not sealed this beast before I was reincarnated, I also presided over the reinforcement ceremony of the demon locking tower in the sect, and I know what to do. It's good that you know it well. The old man called Lao nodded slightly, then frowned and said, but the sudden advance of the weak period of the seal this time is not a good sign. Who knows, something unexpected may happen. Indeed. The big-headed boy nodded solemnly. I have never heard of other forces holding large-scale martial arts competitions similar to the Star Conference and our Sword Conference to intercept the excess power of the Great Formation covering Daxia. Logically speaking, the strength of the seal would not have suddenly dropped a lot. Could it be that the protective formation, based on the royal treasure Zhao Chen's ancient map itself has a problem? The old man surnamed Lao shook his head and said, the sect's true Lord Yixio has checked it out, and there is no problem with the Zhao Chen's ancient array. I'm afraid that in some cave world or history that we don't know about, someone used a replica of the Zhao Chen's ancient map to hold a similar ceremony. But even the true Lord couldn't figure out the specific situation. He only roughly calculated that it might be related to the evil god Song Wuyuru. Song Wuyuru? I seem to have heard of. Oh, it turned out to be the abandoned disciple of the 10,000 Beasts sect? Hey, I don't know whose chess piece he is. The big-headed boy laughed. What do you mean? Although the old man surnamed Lao looks older, His experience is not as good as that of the big-headed boy who had already reached the second level of Dongsuan 300 years ago. In view of the fact that the other party has always been respectful to him and has also popularized a lot of contemporary knowledge, the big-headed boy hesitated for a moment and then explained a few words, saying, "I can't say more, but you remember one thing, any event involving the fog of history must be driven by the existence of the innate 5-te level behind it. The 5 and 8-te, Taogen." The old man surnamed Liao took a deep breath and didn't dare to ask any more questions. He just continued to observe the state of the evil dragon and then disappeared with the big-headed boy. After they left for a long time, the giant dragon that was struggling and twisting suddenly stopped moving, and a woman dressed in black but with an extremely blurry face appeared on the top of the dragon's head. She glanced at the pillars that nailed the chains, then looked up at the mirror of the pool and said to herself silently, "Giant Pavilion really didn't send his engine to guard it? It seems that the rumor may be true. The Zhenjian Shen of Giant Pavilion, who is known as the Ningxiang Parksy Sword, may have a problem. Currently, only Zhenjian Yexio is guarding the mountain gate. But it doesn't matter. Even if Shen Xianan is fine, he can't stop my plan." Jingguan City, inside the Huimengzai Island. Wei County Princess Minghangai, who had just stood up when she heard the noise on the street. She frowned and asked the maid beside her, "What happened outside?" Her personal maid immediately replied, "Princess, it was the Shu Palace that launched the flying boat, preparing to take the people from the martial arts world who were going to Sualangtan to participate in the competition and watch the excitement." "I see. Brother Shu Wang is quite generous, but his prince." "Never mind, I can't say anything." Minghangai shook her head and ordered, "Let Huangsan and Huangsi guard the gate and activate the formation in the house. Now that most of the combat power of Jingguan City has left, we have to pay attention as well." The maid's eyes flashed with a strange color when she heard this, but she still bowed and replied, "Yes." There is another chapter later. Chapter 391 Arrival. Above the central square of Jingguan City, a luxuriously decorated flying boat was suspended in the air more than 10 meters above the ground. This boat was planted with exotic flowers and plants, and was decorated with glass lamps, which shone brightly, illuminating the not so bright sky, as if it were noon. This was the flying magic weapon that the Shu Palace had taken out, the Shengxing flying boat. You should know that the Locking Dragon Pond is more than 500 miles away from Jingguan City, and due to the obstruction of the Giant Pavilion, there are very few cities in Shu where railways are laid. If it weren't for the fact that the Shu Palace would take out this flying boat, most of the people in the martial arts world gathered in Jingguan City would have to set off 1 or 2 days in advance. Due to the reminder of the man in black last night, Zhao Royan, who had obtained the complete blood god inheritance, naturally backed out and was unwilling to take the risk of locking Dragon Pond. What surprised her was that when she retreated, Zhao Fu, who had originally hoped to shine at the sword discussion conference, actually chose not to participate in the conference, giving up the opportunity to become famous and then be accepted as a disciple by a major sect. This touched Zhao Royan and also made her feel ashamed of the little calculations in her heart. What she didn't know was that although Zhao Fu was the reincarnation of a real person, he had no intention of joining the big sect to practice. After all, his identity might not be calculated by the general Dongsun, but the upper sect and the family must have means to investigate, and it can't be concealed at all. And a reincarnated real person like him, even if he joins the upper sect, he can't become a core disciple. At most he can wander around in the inner gate, so why put a layer of shackles on himself? Therefore, the Zhao Fu who was preparing to board the ship with Tang Mao transformed by Ming Zuling at this time was not himself, but an ancient swordsman exchanged by Zhao Chen from the Xingcha. Of course, it was Zhao Chen who manipulated this ancient swordsman. Just like when he manipulated the Zuantan master before, he used the Xingcha to descend into the spirit through the air. Looking at the magnificent flying boat in front of him, compared with the Hanhei flying boat with only 4 seats that he had obtained from the elder who taught the skills in Bikishan Lion Huan's Hei, Zhao Chen couldn't help but sigh. It's really a case of comparing goods and throwing them away. Meng Zuling turned his head and looked at the alternative puppet beside him for a few times. There was a bit of curiosity hidden in his eyes. He asked, Do you want to take this god-moving flying boat over, or do you want me to take you to fly away? Although this god-moving flying boat is a magic weapon, it may not be able to compare with the flying skills of the supernatural cultivators in terms of speed. Let's take the flying boat. It's also a novel experience. Zhao Chen thought about it and replied, okay. Meng Zuling nodded, without saying anything more, just grabbed Zhao Chen's shoulders and flew up, and landed on the deck of the flying boat in an instant. The height of more than 10 feet was obviously not difficult for many monks present. Not to mention the magic power and Gangsha monks who had flying spells. Even the warriors in the Zenki and Liankyo realms used flying claws, or showed their superb light skills, or used their unique abilities, to jump from the ground to the flying boat, and soon filled most of the deck. After nearly half an hour, most of the martial artists in Jingguan City boarded the flying boat, and the large ship anchored in the air suddenly became empty, and merged into the void. Passing through countless layers of space, the flying boat soon arrived in a deep valley, and stopped in front of a hanging waterfall. Seeing this, Fu Linglong, the dragon sword, and Chen Weijing, the sun and moon sword, who were guarding here, came up with the inner and outer disciples of the sword pavilion. Welcome all heroes to the sword contest. Following the shouts of Fu Linglong and Chen Weijing, dozens of sword pavilion disciples raised their swords and shouted, welcome all heroes to the sword contest. The swords in their hands were just ordinary ritual swords, made of ordinary materials, but at this moment, they all shone brightly, and the sword intent moved the supernatural cultivators. Most of the Gangsha and Liankyo cultivators under the supernatural power were taken by the sword intent, and were stunned for a short time. TSK, this is the heaven and earth red dust sword formation that the Jiang disciples usually use to welcome guests, right? It's really extraordinary. Isn't this really a show of strength from the Jiang? The few little ghosts from other states were still brewing their momentum, but they were crushed by the sword intent and all their efforts were wasted. This locking dragon pond is the home court of the Jiang. How can it allow others to accumulate momentum? The masters of supernatural powers on the deck of the flying boat immediately talked about it. Some admired the power of the Jiang, while others complained about the tyranny of the Jiang, and so on. After leading the disciples to complete the red dust welcome ceremony, Fu Linglong and Chen Weijing immediately arranged people to guide a group of heroes in the arena. Of course, most people in the flying boat were not qualified to watch the sword debate in the inner field, and could only watch the live broadcast through the magic formation on the periphery, and listen to the sound by the way. However, thanks to the fact that Tang Mao was invited by invitation, Zhao Chen's transformation into Zhao Fu also benefited from it, and followed Meng Zuling to a slightly distant hilltop. There were already 5 tables of people sitting here, all of them were young supernatural masters, but they were not seeded players. Zhao Chen only recognized one of them, Feng Wantong, the cold desert from the Feng family in Ningzhou. This unfortunate supernatural master was questioned for a day, after being invited back to the mansion by the Prince of Shu. He was not released until recently, and looked very tired. At this time, Meng Zuling, as an assistant, dutifully introduced the supernatural masters sitting there to Zhao Chen. The one on the far left is Siyu Izish, the Suian sword of the Siui family in Weizhou. He is an expert in both zither and sword, and he is very charming, and has a lot of luck with women. You may have something in common with him. In addition, the Cui family is a prominent family in Weizhou, and its strength is even greater than that of the Li family in Ganzhou. Zhao Chen glanced at the young man on the far left, not because he really had a common language with him as Meng Zuling said, but because he had some connections with the Cui family. After annihilating the Z family in Black Wind Castle, he found a jade flute from their treasure house, as well as a matching secret book of falling soul purple flute from the Cui family. Although Zhao Chen could not practice directly, he used it as a reference to improve his sound skills. Therefore, Zhao Chen had a natural liking for this young master Siyu Izish. The 2 seats next to Siyu Izish are Feng Qingsun, the Spring River Sword of the Ancient Poetry Sword School, and Tao Ying, the Sadafu Liu of the Qingcheng Sword School. These 2 are nearly 30 years old, and both were defeated by King and Sword Li Crossing. They may not have come to the sword debate conference without the idea of revenge. In addition, these 2 sword schools have always been of the same blood, and have a very good relationship. While transmitting the sound, Meng Zuling nodded to the two people, and the two supernatural powers also nodded slightly in response. The man behind them, who is about 27 or 28 years old, is the one you should pay the most attention to, because this man was hit by the Taixu hard sword of the Meng family when he was in Yuzhou, and now he is completely under the command of the direct descendant of the Meng family. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 392, Yield. Being hit by the Taixu hard sword, his temperament changed. Maybe the Meng family's magical power utilized the power of the Heart Realm. Just as this thought flashed through Zhao Chen's mind, he saw the man named by Meng Zuling stood up, took the initiative to greet him, and said with a smile, "I'm Zhao Chen, the leader of Yuzhou Shenai Sect. Nice to meet Fairy Tang." Yuzhou Shenai Sect is one of the sects affiliated with the Shi family. The strongest person in the sect is Zhao Chen, who is now known as the white-browed giant tiger, helping the Shi family manage a county. However, Zhao Chen is a cruel person. Although he is intimidated by the 6 gates and dares not bully ordinary people too much, he oppresses the cultivators too much, and there are great complaints. A month ago, Meng Sichen passed by Yuzhou and subdued Zhao Chen with just one strike of the sword, which made him wake up and restrain his disciples from then on, being humble and polite, and no longer behaved like before. This became a good story. It was also after this incident that the news that Meng Sichen had cultivated the Taixu hard sword spread completely. However, Zhao Chen is a subordinate of the Shi family after all. Meng Sichen's move to subdue him with the Taixu hard sword is equivalent to slapping the Shi family in the face. And the Shi family is really indifferent. In addition, the fact that Shi Kang, the illegitimate son of the Shi family, was disfigured by the Jinglian sect and was expelled from the family. Could it be that the Shengxuan's engine of the Shi family has really had problems? As his thoughts turned, Zhao Chen, who was wearing the appearance of Zhao Fu, saluted to the supernatural powers present, and then retreated behind Meng Zuling. But who would have thought that after Zhao Chen exchanged a few simple pleasantries with Meng Zuling, he looked at him and asked with a smile, "Is this little brother called Zhao Fu?" It seems that he was temporarily staying at the residence of Bloodsword young Master Zhao Chen before. The other supernatural powers present frowned at the same time. Except for Feng Wantong, the others had never heard of Zhao Chen's name. They were very surprised why Zhao Jing mentioned him on this occasion, and it seemed that there was something behind his words. Meng Zuling, who had transformed into Tang Mao, glanced at him coldly and said, "Even if Meng Sichen wanted to test Master Chen, he would not use such a stupid and direct method. I guess you are acting on your own. If you are a dog of the Meng family, you must be obedient. This kind of unauthorized action will only ruin your master's business." Hearing Meng Zuling's words, Zhao Jing's face suddenly turned red, and he snorted and said, "Zhao just admires Master Meng as a person, so he obeyed his orders." Fairy Tang's words are too harsh, but he was not confident enough, because he did not get the order from Meng Sichen. Meng Zuling looked at him with pity, nodded seriously and said, "It's good that you think so." Such a tone and such an expression made Zhao Jing furious. He was not a good-tempered person to begin with. Even though his character was changed by the Taixu hard sword, this temper still remained. However, no matter how angry he was, Zhao Jing did not dare to really do it. He had to abide by the rules of the giant pavilion. He was only a middle-grade magical power, and was not the opponent of Tang Miaozi, who was rumored to have practiced the third-grade magical power Bidao Zhuc. Therefore, this white-browed giant tiger had to return to his seat like a clown in the eyes of several magical power cultivators around him, who were either ridiculing, joking, or disdainful. But he was ruthless in his heart, and quietly sent a message to his own disciples of the Shenai sect, asking them to entertain the Zhao Fu following Tang Mao in the refining group competition later. If you can't beat the big one, can you beat the small one? Although he has undergone certain changes under the influence of the Taixu hard sword, some deep-rooted things are still difficult to remove. Not telling his disciples to beat Zhao Fu to death directly was the result of his learning etiquette. After this episode, Meng Zuling also took Zhao Chen to sit at the last seat on this small hill, looking at the dragon locking pond below, waiting for the sword discussion conference to begin. Now, this not so big valley has gathered nearly 50 supernatural masters. They took their disciples and followers to occupy large and small hills, but their eyes would occasionally sweep across the main peak above the waterfall. Because sitting there were the 3 Dangsha and real people who presided over this sword discussion conference. Among these 3 people, the one sitting in the middle was Liao Zuang, the Dangshan swordsman who looked like an immortal. As the elder of the Jian Zhen and the host, he naturally took the first place. On the left and right sides were Ming Hongyan, the king of Shu, and Baimei Fairy of the Flower God sect. Seeing that the supernatural monks who came on the Shengxing flying boat had also entered the venue, Liao Zuang, with white hair and beard, stood up and announced the official start of the first stage of this sword discussion conference. The so-called first stage is the confrontation between the refining and gangsha monks under the age of 30 from various sects and the casual cultivators, which can be regarded as a regulation for the subsequent competition of magical powers. As Liao Zuang finished speaking, the first melee of the refining group began. Yes, a melee. Because there are too many refining monks, a one-on-one competition takes too long, so the giant pavilion divided all the refining monks into 2 groups. Each group fought separately, and the remaining 2 people competed for the championship. Since Zhao Fu played by Zhao Chen was assigned to the first group, he and Ming Zuling simply exchanged glances, and under the guidance of the giant pavilion disciples, they came to the locking dragon pond. The water of the locking dragon pond seemed to have been blessed by some kind of magical power. The feeling of stepping on it was no different from the ground, but it could provide water for monks who are good at water magic, which was extremely magical. As soon as he stood still, Zhao Chen felt several eyes locked on him. He looked over and saw several disciples wearing the uniform of the Divine Will sect looking at him with malicious eyes. Zhao Chen had no fear or nervousness at all. Not to mention that his combat power, after being blessed by the escort master position, was in the first echelon among all the cultivators of the refining acupoints, and he could even fight with the mana cultivators below the 6th level. Now this body is exchanged for an ancient swordsman with the Star Chariot Bloodlock. Even the supernatural cultivators have to use up his star coins before they can hurt him, not to mention the current refining acupoints. But Zhao Chen did not intend to take the first place, otherwise it would be too conspicuous. He participated in the sword trial conference in the form of spiritual dissent, to find out what the Yinzi wanted to do, not to show off. Just as Zhao Chen drew out an ordinary long sword and took a fighting posture, with the sound of a bell on the main peak, nearly 300 cultivators of the refining acupoints realm on the surface of the locking dragon pond immediately rushed towards each other and fought against each other. Most of the disciples of the Divine Will sect stayed outside and isolated a field, while 5 other burly disciples rushed towards Zhao Chen at the first opportunity. As they approached Zhao Chen, their auras continued to rise, and they entangled and connected with each other. The surroundings were filled with murderous intent, and there seemed to be an exchange of breath and true energy. This was the unique skill of the Divine Will sect, the lions roaring to the sky formation. As this entanglement and exchange continued to deepen, Zhao Chen felt that their true energy was rising steadily, and soon reached the limit of the refining orifice, and changed. It seemed empty and hollow, and became one with the surrounding environment. It felt like the spirit merged into the void, and turned into spiritual consciousness. The lions roaring to the sky formation actually turned the 5 people into one, and briefly reached a point close to magic power. The disciples of the Divine Will sect really value me. The 5 of us actually formed a formation when we attacked together. Zhao Chen sighed in his heart, but in the face of this terrifying joint trick, he just calmly raised the long sword in his hand. If it were any other refining orifice, even if Jansen was here, it would be quite a headache for such an attack without the use of firearms. But unfortunately, the 5 people from the Divine Will sect encountered Zhao Chen. He thrust the sword in his hand, connecting his true energy with his spiritual sense, and 7 stars faintly lit up on the sword. Then, Zhao Chen completely ignored the attacks of the 5 Shenai sect disciples, and instead raised his sword without dodging. With an unstoppable momentum, he stabbed out a sword move that was simplified from the Bidao killing sword, and combined with the White Tiger 7 Constellations knife. This sword move was not only mysterious and powerful, but also full of determination and firmness. It actually broke through the momentum of the 5 people's joint efforts, causing their originally closely connected aura to become a little unstable. Relying on the master level swordsmanship realm and vision brought by the escort master, Zhao Chen keenly grasped this flaw, and then the sword light pierced through. The next moment, the 5 people groaned together, each covering their right arm, and fell down, and a large amount of blood gushed out, dyeing the pool of water under their feet a little red. With one sword, Zhao Chen actually cut off one arm of 5 people at the same time. On a mountain peak, King and Sword Li Crossing, who happened to see this scene, praised it this time. I didn't expect that there are such sword cultivators among the casual cultivators. They really have the style of our generation of sword cultivators. Mo when Sword Gushan beside him also nodded silently. This young man's swordsmanship is indeed exquisite, but his indomitable and fearless mentality is the most admirable. In this regard alone, he is even better than me and Linglong. Only you, the eldest brother, are better than him. You must know that in the face of such a terrifying 5 people joining forces, most cultivators will not choose to fight hard with their lives, and are more likely to choose to fight in a guerrilla battle to wait for changes. After all, it is a big melee, and changes are inevitable. But there is also the possibility of being exhausted to death by the 5 people. Zhao Chen's choice is to fight with his life and fight for a ray of hope, which naturally makes the sword cultivators look at him differently. On the mountain, where Ming Zuling was, the artificial man disguised as Tang Mao knew that some refining monks could not be the opponent of Master Chen, but after seeing such an amazing sword, her beautiful eyes were still full of shock. According to calculations, the success rate of this kind of fighting style is actually much lower than that of a free fight, but Master Chen sees the flaw in a short moment, defeated the enemy with one sword, and created a miracle. Is this the brilliance of the human soul? Pure mechanical calculations will never be able to create something like this. Just like the actions I made several times before that followed my thoughts, and violated the calculation results. Maybe that's the performance of me becoming a human. But most of the time, humans are also doing things with a higher probability. Is there any boundary between them? Just as Ming Zuling was lost in thought, she heard the leader of the Divine Will sect, Zhao Chen, blurt out a sentence, impossible. So she curled her lips slightly and imitated Tang Mao's tone and said, Master Zhao, admit it. Chapter 393 Mutation. Master Zhao, I admit it. Hearing this, Siyu Izish, the Suine sword, Feng Qingxin, the Chunjiang sword, Taoying, the sword of Liu, and others who were sitting on the mountain looked at Zhao Jing with a smile, revealing contempt in their eyes. A vulgar person is a vulgar person. Even if he was enlightened by Master Meng, he still couldn't show up. He didn't dare to provoke Fairy Tang, and even sent his own disciples to embarrass her subordinates in private. It's okay to embarrass her, but the key is that he was defeated by a sword in a 5-on-1 situation. It's really a shame. After the secret introduction of Feng Wantong, the Kahan Desert, Siyu Izish and others have already understood where the conflict between Tang Mao and Zhao Jing came from. As for Zhao Jing, who acted on his own and rashly, these magical monks from big sects or prominent families naturally looked down on him. Let's not talk about whether Fairy Tang was really controlled by Master Chen. Even if it was, Master Meng came to rescue Fairy Tang out of kindness, not to make enemies. Is it necessary for you, Zhao Jing, to do this? Seeing Zhao Jing's facial features twisted, Siyu Izish and the others ignored him and turned to discuss Zhao Chen's sword. If I'm not mistaken, there is a shadow of the Shi family's Bidao killing sword in the sword of Brother Zhaofu, and the Shenai sect is originally a subordinate of the Shi family, and all its skills are restrained by the Shi family's skills. Otherwise, it would not be easy to break the joint tricks close to the level of magic power with one sword. Siyu Izish said directly without giving Zhao Jing any face. With the master defeating the servant, it is natural to win. But these words made Zhao Jing's brain congested again, and he wanted to fight with the people on the peak. But the difference in strength still made him regain his reason. Not only is there the shadow of the Bidao killing sword, but also a little bit of the White Tiger 7 Stars knife of the Jin Samu family. I guess it's the work of Fairy Tang. Chunjiang sword Feng Qingxin said, stroking his beard. He had fought with the illegitimate children of the Mu family and appreciated the style of the White Tiger 7 Stars knife. Meng Zuling smiled when he heard it and responded, "When I practiced the White Tiger 7 Stars knife, he had watched it. There is nothing wrong with this statement. After all, her White Tiger 7 Stars knife was originally learned under the guidance of Tang Miao summoned by Zhao Chen, and Zhao Chen was naturally watching. So that's the case. Then this little brother named Zhao Fu is really good at comprehension, and his future is promising." Cu Izish sighed. And Rusting Willow Taoying and Spring River Sword Feng Kingston said at the same time, "What a pity. It's a pity that such a young sword cultivator couldn't join their Qingcheng Sword School or Gushi Sword School. After all, after learning the White Tiger 7 Stars sword, even if it's just the basics, it's unlikely that he would join other sects." While several supernatural power cultivators were talking, the battle situation on the Lock Dragon Pond gradually became clear. The scattered cultivators and most of the disciples of small sects had been injured and left the field. Only the disciples of the upper sect and the aristocratic families remained on the surface of the pond. Among them, the only exception was Zhao Chen. However, he was standing with 3 Yaoshi family disciples at this time, fighting against the attacks of the Sword Pavilion disciples together. Speaking of which, the reason why Zhao Chen joined forces with the Shi family disciples was that after he defeated 5 masters of the Shenai sect with one sword, he was besieged by the other Shenai sect disciples who had come to their senses. Although Zhao Chen still performed with ease, the Shi family disciples not far away came to help. Although the Shi family did not pursue the betrayal of the Shenai sect for various reasons, the family members naturally hated the traitors. So after witnessing Zhao Chen's sword, Shi Zhu, Shi Li, and Shi Shan of the Shi family came to help without any hesitation. Among the 3, Shi Li and Shi Shan are both illegitimate children. Like Shi Kong, who was forcibly subdued by Zhao Chen, they practiced the superior martial arts in the 7-star Immortal sword box, while Shi Zhu is the legitimate son. He mastered the fundamental method of the Shi family, the 5 stars and the sun and the moon mixed sutra. As a family stabilizing method that directly points to Shengsun, the 5 stars and the sun and the moon mixed sutra is divided into 7 parts: gold, wood, water, fire, earth, sun, and moon. Each part is very mysterious and has its own merits, and Shi Zhu is currently practicing the Mercury part. As a practitioner of the essence of Chengxing, Shi Zhu is calm and wise. He has the home field advantage in this dragon locking pond. When he swings his sword, several water dragons follow him. It is really powerful. With the mysterious swordsmanship that Zhao Chen obtained from the talisman that far surpassed the realm of his peers, the 4 of them were actually not even a match for them. However, their dazzling performance soon attracted the attention of the biggest rivals in this competition, the real host Jianje disciples. After Zhao Chen and Shi Zhu and the other 4 dealt with all the disciples of Shenyi sect, the 4 inner disciples of Jianje also held their swords and blocked them. Brother Zhao, most of the inner disciples of Jianje practiced Teizu and Beijing Jian too. This technique originally came from the great supernatural power Zhu Shan Zilin of Teichu Dao Jun, but the true meaning is different, so Teichu was changed to Teizuan to distinguish it. Shi Zhu transmitted the information he knew to Zhao Chen. In fact, I have the authentic key realm technique corresponding to the supernatural power of Zhu Shan Zilin. That is, Shen Fuming Yuan Guang Zhao Wuji Gong of Kiang Hua School, one of the 9 veins of Kunlun. Zhao Chen's heart moved, and he smiled and said, "Then I will learn it well." There was no fear or worry in his tone, but it was full of fighting spirit and joy. This made the 3 people of the Shi family stunned at first, and then they also ignited their passion. The youngest girl, Shi Shan, said directly, "Brother Zhao is really courageous, then let the 4 of us experience the peerless swordsmanship of the Jianje together." In fact, this opportunity is indeed rare. After all, if there is no sword discussion conference, the inner disciples of the Jianje will at least achieve the magic power realm before they are allowed to go down the mountain to travel. The swordsmanship used by the masters of magic power is very different from that used in refining the orifices. After noticing the fighting spirit of the 4, the disciples of the Jianje on the other side also became serious and prepared for battle. The eyes of the masters of magical powers on the surrounding peaks were also attracted at this time, and they discussed with interest, who do you think will win? Zhang Rumeng turned her head to look at Lin Yang, who was drinking not far away, and asked. Lin Yang thought about it and answered very bluntly, although Zhao Fu's swordsmanship is at a very high level, the swordsmanship he uses is not top notch, and it feels a bit patchwork. If he doesn't have anything new, I'm afraid he is not a match for the inner disciples of the Sword Pavilion. You only talked about Zhao Fu. What about the other children of the Shi family? Zhuge King on the other side asked with a smile. Seeing the question, Lin Yang curled his lips with disdain and said, Zhao Fu's swordsmanship is still somewhat interesting. But the three people of the Shi family just rely on the mysterious skills and sharp magic weapons, and they themselves have no redeeming features. Even the stone bead, it is only because of the geographical advantage of the locking dragon pond that its skills can be brought into play, but its swordsmanship level is simply not good to look at. If all the children of the Shi family are at this level, it's no wonder they have declined. On another mountain peak, Wu Hualin of the Wu family also came to a similar conclusion as Lin Yang, but Meng Sichen, who was on the same peak, smiled and shook his head and gave a different judgment. Maybe it was true for the three people of the Shi family before, but after this battle, I'm afraid they will be reborn. The strength of the mind will naturally allow them to go further. Just as the masters of magical powers were discussing, and Zhao Chen and Shi Zhu were about to fight with the four people from the Sword Pavilion, something strange happened. On the main peak, after looking at each other, Ming Hongyan, the king of Shu, and Beimei Fairy of the Flower God sect attacked at the same time, trying to control Liao Zhuang, the Dangshan swordsman who presided over the sword discussion meeting. However, even though he was caught off guard, as a Dangshan real person, Liao Zhuang responded immediately. An ancient heavy sword phantom rose behind him to resist the sneak attack of the two real people. This is his Dharma form, the Dangshan sword. Boom. After a loud noise, the Dangshan sword magic response shattered, and Liao Zhuang's aura quickly wilted. He looked at the Shu King Ming Hongyan and the Flower God Sects Beimei Fairy in front of him in disbelief, as if he was doubting how the other party could be so strong. But he soon figured out the reason. You can't be Ming Hongyan and Duan Beimei. Who are you? After asking, Liao Zhuang's face suddenly changed again, and he said in shock and anger, the magic circle around the locking dragon pond is not activated. What did you do? Fairy Beimei did not rush to take action again. She took a leisurely look at the locking dragon pond below, smiled and said, you can guess. How are the disciples of your sword pavilion guarding the outer magic circle hub? At this point, she paused and continued, in addition, you still hope that the big-headed boy can come to support you, right? Unfortunately, he can't be separated at this time. The King Qin Guang of the underworld has blocked him in your secret space in the underworld. Hearing this, Liao Zhuang took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and shouted again, who are you? What do you want to do? Although he asked, Liao Zhuang roughly guessed their purpose. The king of Shu Ming Hongyan, who had been silent all this time, spoke for the first time at this time. As you thought, our goal is to remove the seal of the evil dragon. Release the evil dragon. Do you know how much damage it will cause to Shu? Liao Zhuang frowned and said sternly, if you dare to do this, you will have to face the wrath of the court and all the monks of the sects in my Shu. No matter who is behind you, they can't bear it. King of Shu Ming Hongyan smiled and said, you don't have to scare me. In addition, do you think I don't know that you have already passed the message to Jianzhi? It's just that we don't care. And the reason we stopped is not to waste time talking to you, but to guard against another tough guy. As he said that, he glanced at the mountain where Meng Sichen was, sneered and said, Meng Guangling, don't hide. I know you are there. Please vote for the monthly ticket at the beginning of the month. Please collect. Please recommend. Chapter 394 King Yuan. Liao Zhuang was slightly surprised. He followed the gaze of the king of Shu and looked towards the mountain where Meng Sichen was. He saw a figure suddenly appear beside several supernatural monks who were on guard. He wore a turban and a Confucian robe. He had a gaunt face and grey hair. He looked a bit like Meng Sichen. His appearance did not feel abrupt, nor did it appear out of thin air. Instead, it made everyone feel that they had never noticed that place before, and it was as if the fog that was originally imperceptible in front of them had disappeared. Uncle, how could you? Meng Sicheng's face, which had always seemed calm and composed, showed a rare look of surprise, but he quickly reacted and said to himself, no wonder I always felt that someone was following me, but I had no clue. I didn't expect it to be you, uncle. Hearing his muttering, Wu Hualin, Shen Tiance and other magical cultivators on the top of the peak also showed a look of realization. Wu Hualin was so shocked that he blurted out, "Or 3-foot sword across the Heart Coast, and 5 things crown the Moon God Palace." Brother Sicheng's uncle is he the real person Meng Guangling Meng, who is known as the sword across the Heart Sea? Shen Tiance, the magical power of the 10,000 beasts gate next to him, nodded slightly and transmitted a message to the people around him. I was fortunate enough to meet Senior Meng once with my master, so I'm sure it was him. Senior Meng followed quietly. I'm afraid he had already calculated that King Shu and Fairy Beimei were going to make trouble, so he hid in the dark. The Battle of Dongsuan is about to break out here. Brother Wu, Brother Qin, it's not good for us to get involved in this kind of thing, so it's better for us to join forces to protect ourselves. The one he called Brother Qin was Qin Lai, a true disciple of the Jinglian sect, one of the upper sects. He was a veteran supernatural power master in his mid-20s, and he also failed to achieve a first-grade supernatural power, so he had not been listed as a champion by Zhao Chen before. At this time, Qin Lai and Wu Hualin looked at each other, nodded, and tacitly agreed to Shen Tiance's proposal. To be honest, they didn't know why the 3 real people turned against each other, nor did they know which side Master Meng wanted to help when he suddenly showed up. After all, the 3 real people spoke with their spiritual consciousness, and outsiders couldn't hear them at all. So Wu Hualin, Qin Lai, and Shen Tiance tacitly formed a small group and isolated Meng Sicheng to avoid being involved in the fight. At this time, the body of Master Meng Guangling also flew up from the top of the peak and floated not far from the main peak. Then he stroked his beard and said, when I heard that my Sicheng was coming to participate in the sword discussion conference, I had a whim and made a fortune. The result was a couplet of poetry, which was, the iron mirror cooks gold, the sky is full of fire, the green lake dragon lies in the sunset. So I guess the reason why you 2 are not in a hurry to take action is not because you care about me, but because the time has not come yet. King Shuming Hangyuan was stunned when he heard this, but then he sneered and said, Meng Guangling, it seems that you are not only good at the Heart Realm magical power, but also very good at calculation. But now the overall situation has been decided, even you can't stop it, not to mention that we have also made plans for your appearance. If you are sensible, just watch honestly. Meng Guangling, who looked like a Confucian scholar, shook his head slightly and said, although I don't know who you 2 are, since you have refused to show your true face until now, I think you are also righteous people. It's none of my business whether you let this evil dragon go or not, but once this evil dragon escapes, it will definitely harm the people of Shu, and I can't ignore it. Having said that, Meng Guangling stretched out his right hand from his wide robe, grabbed casually, and countless flames emerged from the void, condensing into a long sword with a fire dragon entangled. Then, he sighed and said, alas, Master Yixio of the Sword Pavilion has not arrived yet. I guess he was stopped by other Shengsuan seniors. King Shuming Hangyuan showed a complacent look on his face, and then shouted, since you know that even Master Zhenjin can't do anything, how dare you fight with us? Before he finished speaking, the strange fragrance of flowers instantly filled the surrounding space, making the King Shu sober up suddenly, and did not say the name of his organization. At this time, the voice of Fairy Beimei came over. When he said the first sentence to you, he was indulging your nature and letting you get carried away. I have warned you so many times, but you still fell into his trap. Having said that, the fairy turned to Meng Guangling and snorted, Take-Su Heart Sword is really worthy of its reputation. If I hadn't been vigilant, I'm afraid I wouldn't have been able to completely get rid of your influence. Meng Guangling didn't show any frustration at being discovered. Instead, after sniffing the fragrance of the flowers, he commented thoughtfully, this fragrance is indeed very similar to the direct teachings of the Flower God sect, but the essence is completely different. Is this some new type of demonic magic from the Demonwood Academy? If it weren't for the good relationship I have with several fairies in the Flower God sect, I'm afraid I wouldn't be able to tell it apart. There aren't many techniques that can control demonic magic so easily. Which family are you from? Hearing this, Fairy Baimoi narrowed her eyes and said, can't we be demons in human form? Demons at the level of Demon King blatantly descended into the territory of Daxia? How could my Daxia Zhao Chen Xingchen Great Array agree to it? Moreover, if you are really evil spirits, given your madness, you would have revealed your true form by now. As Meng Wanling said this, a pair of transparent wings that ordinary people could not see suddenly appeared behind him. They flapped gently, and the surrounding scene changed slightly. However, except for Meng Wanling himself, the other cultivators in the dragon locking pond did not seem to notice it. However, Liao Zuan, who had been severely injured and was rushing to heal his wounds, suddenly opened his eyes and said in a hurry, Senior Meng, don't pull them into the dream. Before he finished speaking, a strange female voice sounded in everyone's ears. The real lock dragon pond exists in the mirror reflection of the dream of the mind world. If you didn't happen to bring us in, even I wouldn't be able to really find it. I can only see its phantom in the mirror world of reality. So, thank you so much. Along with this voice, a woman in a black dress suddenly appeared. She had a graceful figure and elegant temperament, but her face was covered by a layer of mist, making it difficult to see her face. The woman stretched out her slender fingers and pointed at Meng Wanling, who was at a loss. The lock dragon pond in the dream suddenly changed from morning to dusk in an instant. The sky was filled with fiery red clouds, which reflected on the sparkling water, and the shadow of a giant dragon entangled in chains was also vaguely revealed. The iron mirror cooks gold and the sky is full of fire. The green lake dragon lies in the sunset. This prophecy was actually completed by my own hands. Which true lord calculated me? Meng Wanling took a deep breath, looked at the woman whose face he could not see clearly, and asked coldly, your aura alone suppressed me, and I can't move. I think it's the existence of Shengsun. Who are you? At this point, he suddenly realized something. His face changed slightly, and he said in a lost voice, no, I'm afraid you are not a human. Are you King Gion, the temple priest of the Dragon King Temple? How could you enter the territory of Daxia? Caven, so much for today. Chapter 395 Nightmare. In an unknown cave, accompanied by a flash of sword light that destroyed the world, this small world was instantly plunged into disaster such as volcanic eruptions, earth shaking, the falling of the sun and the moon, and even the sky began to become unstable, as if it was about to break apart. In this doomsday-like scene, a Taoist with grey hair, but a young face, and a sense of freedom was stepping into the void, looking at an old man dressed as a monk sitting in a ruin. From the outside, this Taoist has no majestic features, not even the slightest special features, but when observing with divine consciousness or immortal consciousness, it can naturally reflect an ancient flying sword, whose sword energy soars into the sky, as if it can cut off all laws and powers, and form a world of its own. The aura of the monk is not much inferior to that of the Taoist, but it has a hint of decay and madness. The Taoist is Yi Xianheng, one of the Shengsun of the Jianje. He was usually cheerful and playful, but it was rare for him to be serious. He looked at the monk with a solemn look, and after a while he asked coldly, Brother Shen, it is fine that you have abandoned the way of swordsmanship in order to break through and seek the ancient Buddhist faith. But why do you associate with evil spirits and stop me from going to the dragon locking pond? The old man dressed as a monk was another Shengsun Zhenjin of the Jianje, Shen Xianan, who was known as the Ningxiang Parxi sword. Of course, Shen Xianan seemed to have abandoned the way of swordsmanship and became a monk. Junior brother Yi, whether you believe it or not, I have never had any contact with the temple priest of the Dragon King Temple. I was asked to stop you this time, and I had to do it. Shen Xianan was silent for a few breaths before he spoke. Moreover, I promise that after the evil dragon escapes, it will not bring disaster to Shazhang. Who asked you to do it, so that you, senior brother, would not hesitate to fight with me? Yi Xianheng, the immortal Lord Yixio, narrowed his eyes, and the sword light transformed by his soul pointed directly at Shen Xianan. Is it the person who gave you the so-called balance the Tao with faith method? Facing the sharpness and heaviness that seemed to be able to completely shatter him, Shen Xianan did not answer, but only said Amitabha. Seeing his senior brother's attitude, Yi Xianheng immediately knew the answer and did not ask any more questions. He just transformed into a huge sword like the Buzhao mountain in myths and legends, and smashed it hard at Shenxian, the former frost-breaking evil sword, now the cold light Buddha, sighed, and the boundless ice and snow instantly covered the entire cave, adding another disaster to its doomsday, and also stagnated the sword light like a sacred mountain in the void. Every time I see such a scene, I can't help but sigh. Brother, have you transformed the Fantian seal in the myth and legend into the sword method? Shenxian muttered in his heart, and looked outside the cave. Although that person promised not to let the people in Shu die, necessary precautions are still needed. In the dream of the locking dragon pond, the so-called sword crossing the heart Si Mengguangling Mengzenren found that he was used by King Guan, the temple keeper of the Dragon King Temple. His face instantly turned grey, as if he had suffered a very serious blow. Then, half of his body quickly expanded and turned into a huge bubble, and one side of the bubble had hundreds or thousands of pairs of transparent wings. He actually took the initiative to let himself completely transform into an immortal to counter the suppression of the Shengxian fruit position and prevent the other party from releasing the evil dragon. This is an extremely dangerous move. Even if the cultivators who practiced the Taixu hard sword had special methods to maintain the immortal state for a period of time, they were not 100% sure to recover. At this stage, he was only a thin line away from Dao evil. Seeing this scene, not only was the seriously injured Dangshan swordsman Liao Zuang shocked, but even the king of Shumeng Hangyuan and Fairy Baimei, who were obviously stronger than him, quickly retreated to the edge of this stream, and their consciousness deliberately avoided the position of Mengjia Dangsun, and did not dare to observe at all. It's a good decision, the graceful King Guan temple priest exclaimed, but did not look embarrassed at all, just stretched out his right hand again and gently clenched it. Immediately afterwards, the foam that half of Meng Wangling's body turned into was controlled by an invisible force, and could no longer move forward. Although I'm not good at dreams and the mind realm, there is an essential difference between Shengxian and Dangsun, which cannot be compensated by the environment. Temple Keeper King Guan seemed to smile, then looked at Master Liao, who wanted to rush over, but was suppressed by his breath and couldn't move, then went straight to the surface of the pool illuminated by the setting sun, and stepped into it. In the real locking dragon pool, after the four masters suddenly disappeared, the supernatural powers on the peaks looked at each other and all breathed a sigh of relief. Only Meng Zuling frowned, because she found that in addition to the four masters, Zhao Chen, Shi Zhu, Shi Li, Shi Shan, and the other four sword pavilion disciples who were in a confrontation on the surface of the pool were gone, and no one knew where they went. At this time, the contemporary seven swords of Jianje came to their senses first. King Gan sword Li Crossing, Mo Wen sword Gu Shan, Yu Long sword Fu Linglang and Sun and Moon sword Chen Weijing quietly surrounded the Shu Wang's son Mengzu Dao, which made the latter shocked and angry, but dared not speak. After all, his father and Baimei Fairy teamed up to attack the real person of Jianje right in front of him, and there was no way to argue. But when Li Crossing ordered people to check why the nearby magic circle was not opened, the change happened again. Countless strange monsters that could only be seen in nightmares suddenly appeared out of thin air. Some of them were like evil spirits, some were like a combination of multiple monsters, and some were humanoid creatures with pale faces, and so on. But as soon as they appeared, they attacked the monks around them. There were also two more monsters beside Meng Zuling, and they looked very familiar. One was Duan Mingsu, who looked like a zombie, and the other was no one, who was in tatters and flashing with sparks. Is this the thing in our nightmare being released? What happened to the four real people in their dreams that caused the change? The well-informed Meng Zuling immediately had a guess in her mind, but she had no time to think about it at this time, because the zombie-like Duan Mingsu had laid out a formation diagram to trap her in it. And the damaged no one also pounced on him, intending to self-destruct to die with her. The bottom of the locking dragon pond in the dream. Because he had many similar experiences, Zhao Chen discovered the time and space conversion at the first time, so he did not panic. After all, he was now using the body of an ancient swordsman. At worst, he could just take it back and exchange it and return to the Star Chariot. But the next moment, his eyes widened because he was horrified to find that his position was right at the mouth of a giant dragon. There is another chapter later. Chapter 396 Nightmare. Seeing the ferocious dragon head so close, Zhao Chen estimated that his forehead would have been covered with cold sweat if it were not for the ability of the talisman to shield fear. But fortunately, the dragon seemed to disdain the ant at its mouth and just swept him casually with its dragon whiskers, throwing him to the bottom of the pool. Although its action was slight, it was no different from a magical attack for Zhao Chen. With just this one blow, he lost nearly 8,000 star coins. His body was even more decelerated by the water and slammed into the bottom of the pool, creating a pit tens of meters deep, and stopped only when he reached the edge of the dream. I should have cancelled the summoning just now. Zhao Chen, who was lying at the bottom of the pit, felt distressed for a while, and then he quietly swam back to the bottom of the pool, extended his spiritual sense, and observed the situation. Since the money has been spent, it is necessary to find out what happened in order to get back the money. Soon, a huge black dragon locked by 9 metal pillars covered with divine patterns came into his sight. However, this was not the point. The point was that a woman was standing at the neck of the black dragon. The woman was dressed in black clothes, and her face could not be seen clearly. However, the terrifying aura on her body was the most terrifying among the people Zhao Chen had seen since he traveled through time. Even the Black Sun's spirit that descended in the strange domain was slightly inferior to her, and the terrifying black dragon was as obedient as a pet under the white palm of the woman. This 5-clawed black dragon is the evil dragon sealed in the dragon locking pond, right? It is said that it has the strength of a great evil level demon, that is, the progression level. So, where did this woman in black come from? Could it be a Taoist master who descended? When Zhao Chen was thinking about it, he suddenly saw the woman on the dragon's neck turned her head and looked at him, Oh no. Zhao Chen's pupils dilated, and he was about to cancel the summoning and let his spirit return to the star chariot. But at this moment, a chuckle suddenly came from his ear. This generation's candidate? It's quite interesting, much braver than Zhang Zanwan who founded the Dragon Tiger sect. As she said that, she seemed to gather strength and attack Zhao Chen. But just as the woman seemed to slowly raise her right hand and extend her index finger, she suddenly stopped. Then, she raised her head slightly, frowned and said, Taiwei, no, I should call you Zuanwei. Why did you come to the dragon locking pond when you are not in the Lycan Sword Palace? As she said that, she suddenly raised the corners of her mouth, nodded and said, I see. Then I won't make things difficult for this candidate, but he can't let his spirit leave now. Otherwise, with his identity, if he connects to the Zhaoshan star array, I will be in a lot of trouble. Let him stay in my time cage for a while. Yes, the reason why Zhao Chen has not successfully cancelled the summoning, even though he had the idea of returning to the star chariot, is because the time around him has been stagnant by the black clothed woman, and he is in another special time and space bubble. It is similar to the bubble that Meng Wanling fell into before. Zheng Qinggan's first grade magical power, the immortal body of the evil dragon, relies on the law of time to anchor the physical state at a certain point in time, and the source of her practice is the Dragon King. As a temple priest of the Dragon King, King Yuan's authority over time will only be stronger than that of the Zheng family. At this time, the black-clothed woman King Yuan had retracted the finger pointing at Zhao Chen and put it back on the scales on the dragon's neck. After doing this, she once again cast her gaze on Zhao Chen and the time and space cage, then rolled her eyes and said with a smile, since you have been imprisoned temporarily, as an apology, I will tell you what I'm doing. Although you can't hear it now, you will naturally be able to recall it after you go back. In the valley, where the dragon locking pond is located, as countless monsters from the nightmare enter reality, the venue of the sword conference suddenly turned into a battlefield. Since these monsters are derived from the things that the monks present are most afraid of, all the geniuses, including the 7 swords, are in a bitter battle. The only good news is that no matter how bizarre these monsters are, their level is only magic power at most. The opponent of King and Sword Li Crossing at this time is a fierce ghost in red. Although this fierce ghost has a veil on his face, 2 blood marks flow from under the veil, making people who see it immediately cursed. And her figure is also erratic, sometimes appearing in front of Li Crossing, and sometimes lying on his back, making it difficult to capture. This female ghost was the first evil spirit that Li Crossing encountered when he entered the demon-locking tower in the giant cave heaven to train. At that time, he was almost drained of his yang energy by this female ghost, so the other party has been his nightmare for a long time. Li Crossing thought that he had gotten rid of her shadow after achieving the first grade magical power, but he didn't expect that she would appear here. After I achieved the magical power, I heard that you were killed by junior sisterling, and I always felt empty in my heart. Now that we meet again in this way, it's just right to make a break. Li Crossing casually lifted the red veil of the female ghost and looked at the familiar face. There was no joy or sadness on his face. He turned his body into a sword and used the first grade magical power of Sword God that was passed down by the giant Jie. On the other side, Lin Yang, who joined forces with Zhang Rumeng and Zhuge King to fight the enemy, looked at the three people in front of him who were neither human nor ghost and whose appearances could be vaguely identified. Zhang Rumeng, Zhuge King, and Song Weiyuru, and his face became sour. Obviously, this Zhang Rumeng with a sinister and cunning face, green face and fangs is his nightmare. The disfigured Zhuge King is most likely Zhang Rumeng's nightmare. He may have suffered a lot at the hands of Zhuge King before, but no one knows it. And that evil god Song Weiyuru is Zhuge King's nightmare. So, no one takes me seriously. Lin Yang said unhappily with lightning entangled around him. Zhuge King glanced at Zhang Rumeng, shook his head and laughed. Is this how I look in your mind? It seems that you are jealous of my handsomeness. The secret in his heart was revealed, and Zhang Rumeng was somewhat embarrassed, but he still forced himself to calm down, and said in a deep voice, don't worry about these details. The tricky thing now is these three people in front of us. If they have all our magical powers, it will be a big trouble. The first grade magical power is closely related to the source of the magical power. No matter what means are used, it cannot be perfectly simulated. Our chance of winning lies in this. Zhuge King looked at Song Weiyuru, who defeated him with one move a year ago, and said solemnly, the temporary position granted by the Xingqiu magic power list is the same, and it must be impossible to simulate it. Chapter 397 All Parties. Chapter 396 All Parties. The chapter number is wrong. Zhang Rumeng subconsciously refuted Zhuge King's words. Not entirely true. It is rumored that the Star God has a magical power that can perfectly reproduce all the unique skills in the world, and even the source can be simulated. Zhuge King rolled his eyes at him and said unhappily, will you die if you don't sing against me? These monsters that came out of the dream are probably the result of something going wrong in the mind world of Master Meng, the sword across the hard sea. What does it have to do with the Star God? Lin Yang, who was standing aside, had an increasingly distorted expression on his face when he heard their conversation. He couldn't help but interrupted. The two of you stop chatting, as if no one is around. The most urgent task is to get rid of these three ghosts in front of us. Didn't you realize that the disfigured version of Zhuge King on the opposite side has already set up a large formation around us? Hearing this, Zhuge King and Zhang Rumeng smiled at each other. Then the former shook his head and said, of course I found out, and I have been fighting with Zhang Rumeng's nightmare for the position of this formation that can change at any time, and for the control. And Zhang Rumeng is also playing a fake game with Song Weiyuru who has become my nightmare. Otherwise, why do you think the three of them are standing still? Lin Yang was stunned by these words. As a disciple of the Xingqiu sect, his true teachings, whether it was Xingqiu Thunder Book, Xiandu Great Thunder Jade Book, or his major Purple Star Thunder Jade Sutra, all took the path of using thunder to cleanse all evil. Especially his Xingqiu Purple Thunder, which was the most noble. No external evil could harm him, including the fortune, curses and other means imposed by others, which could not hurt him, but might even cause the opponent to be backfired. So he didn't have a deep study of formations, positions, fate and so on. Anyway, just strike with thunder. So far, the only one in the same realm who can block his thunder method is Zhang Rumeng's golden light curse that is like a cheat. Lin Yang was depressed for a while, and then asked unhappily, then what should I do? You just need to aim at the opposite and strike hard with thunder, so that he doesn't have the opportunity to intervene in the competition between me and Song Weiyuru. Zhang Rumeng smiled and said meaningfully, isn't this what you have always wanted to do? You are quite self-aware. Lin Yang suddenly understood, and without hesitation, he raised his hand and shot out a purple lightning with a noble aura, directly hitting the Zhang Rumeng in his nightmare. At the same time, Ming Zhu Dao, the Prince of Shu, was being besieged by dozens of women. Obviously, these were all female cultivators of various physiques who were killed by him because of practicing. Although he appeared to be extremely indifferent to what he did, he would still feel fear when he woke up in the middle of the night. Most of these women originally only had the cultivation level of Gangsha realm, and some even had no cultivation at all, but at this moment, they were strengthened by the nightmare, and could use their magical powers to force Ming Zhu Dao to be in a dilemma and in danger. At the top of another mountain, the situation of Wu Hualin of the Wu family, Shen Tians of the 10,000 Beasts sect, and Qin Lai of the Pure Lotus sect was even more dangerous. A giant beast several tens of meters tall appeared in front of Wu Hualin. It looked like a big whale, but it had countless red tentacles on its back, which was extremely disgusting. The Wu family monopolized the South China Sea business. Wu Hualin had been traveling on the sea since he was a child, and this monster was the first evil spirit he encountered in the sea. At that time, the family killed it at the cost of capsizing 3 ironclad ships. Wu Hualin, who watched the battle up close, thought he had forgotten it long ago, but he didn't expect it to become something he feared deep in his heart. No wonder I don't like to go out to the ocean. Well, if I can kill it and get rid of the inner demon, my practice will definitely go further. In a sense, being let out of the nightmare doesn't seem to be a bad thing. Wu Hualin unfurled his long sword, not caring about the rules of the sword pavilion. A number of small gunboats 5 or 6 meters long reappeared out of thin air, and then opened fire at full power. In an instant, a standard ammunition covered the big whale with tentacles. Judging from this scene, Meng Zuling's statement that the Wu family's Minghe sword sutra was about to become the Minghe ship sutra seemed to be correct. On the other hand, the enemy in the nightmare of the true disciple of the Wanshao Gate was even more terrifying. It was actually a strange blue bird. Although its body was only the size of a few people and far less than the giant whale next to it, Shen Tians of the Wanshao Gate was completely stunned when he saw it, and then he knelt down unconsciously, with no intention of fighting at all. If Meng Sicheng, who was on the same peak, had not quickly used the hard sword secret method to cut off his fear, he would have fallen in the mouth of the blue bird. Don't be fooled by its appearance. No matter what terrible thing this bird is in reality, as a nightmare, its strength is only limited to its magical powers, at least for now. As an expert in the heart realm and dreams, Meng Sicheng is very familiar with this kind of nightmare that comes from the fear deep in his heart, so he was able to control his fear in time, and did not let it manifest. Shen Tians, who was temporarily free of fear, finally came back to his senses. He first nodded gratefully to Meng Sicheng, then drew out his magical sword, and said softly, "Ancestor, please forgive my rudeness." At the same time, Siu Izish, the Suine sword, Feng Qingxin, the Chunjiang sword, Taoying, the sword of Liu, and Zhao Chen, the leader of the Shenai sect, who were on the top of the same mountain with Ming Zuling, also welcomed their own fear. Not to mention other people, just say that the person in front of Zhao Chen was actually the current head of the Shi family, the Dongsuan Zenren Shifeng. Obviously, after he betrayed the Shi family and joined Meng Sicheng, what he feared most was the Shi family's liquidation. Facing the Dongsuan Zenren, although Zhao Chen was afraid in his heart, after understanding the nature of the Shifeng in front of him, he felt some inexplicable excitement. If I can beat this Shifeng, I may never have to worry about it again in the future. With this thought, Zhao Jing actually took the initiative to attack Shifeng. But what he didn't know was that people like Lin Yang, Zhang Rumeng, Zhu King, and even Wu Hualin, Shen Tians, etc., did have the hope of defeating their own nightmares, clearing their minds, and making further progress in their practice. This is based on the fact that they are not afraid in the first place, or have already surpassed the real bodies of those nightmares, but there is still fear buried deep in their hearts. But Zhao Jing's situation is different. He is obviously scared to death, and has never had any confidence. How can he defeat the nightmare? In the final analysis, to defeat the concrete form of the nightmare, one must rely on one's own Tao heart. Therefore, with just one move, Zhao Jing suffered a heavy blow. While revealing an expression of disbelief, his heart was full of resentment. Why can others do it, but I can't? Exclamation mark. So when he caught a glimpse of Meng Suling, who had already solved Du and Meng Su, and no one on the side, he suddenly had evil intentions. There is another chapter later. Chapter 398 Heaven. In fact, there is no big hatred between Zhao Jing and Meng Suling. It is nothing more than the latter humiliating him before, which made him lose face. Logically speaking, Zhao Jing should not have too much hatred towards Meng Suling. However, because Zhao Jing was transformed by the Taixu Heart Sword, he has been suppressing his nature, which has caused his accumulated psychological problems to become more and more serious. Originally, Meng Sichen planned to help him vent after the sword conference, but who would have thought that, because of the changes caused by his great uncle Meng Wanling, the problems in the minds of the supernatural powers would have materialized, and the leader of the Shenai sect was defeated by his own fear, which made his psychology completely distorted. If it were not for the low grade of his skills, he would probably have faced the danger of Taoism. But even so, Zhao Jing was controlled by extreme emotions at this time, and wanted to bring his nightmare to Meng Suling, who had just paid a lot of price to defeat Du and Meng Su and no one. Although the materialized nightmare will first attack the master who created it, it will also attack others, or be attacked by others. However, most of the magical monks present tacitly chose to solve their own problems, and would not interfere with other people's nightmares at will. After all, overcoming the biggest fear in the heart is also a great opportunity for the monks. Meng Suling obviously did not expect Zhao Jing to do this at this time. Without any preparation, she was immediately locked by the Bidao killing sword of the Shi family. Its killing intention, death aura, and sharp feeling instantly swept her soul, directly fixing her in place, and it seemed that she could only wait for the death. But Meng Suling, as an artificial person, has a variety of means. In addition to the incomplete Senluo Wangxiang, there is another magical power for saving life. This magical power originated from the West, and its name is very simple, which is spell triggering. That is to set a magic power sequence in advance, which can trigger magical powers or morning star spells with different numbers in the sequence under specific circumstances, to deal with various extreme situations and protect oneself. Now, after her soul was fixed by the killing intent, the spell trigger magical power automatically operated and released a long prepared 4th grade magical power spirit god body protection spell. This is the magical power of the Tang Mao female hero she has transformed into, which has an excellent defensive effect on the soul. Meng Suling had never learned this magical power. It was arranged by Mr. Chen that the Tang Mao female hero personally performed it, and then it was recorded in the magical power sequence by her. As the spirit god body protection spell unfolded, Meng Zuling's thoughts also resumed, so she immediately performed the White Tiger 7 Constellations knife and the 7 Stars Divine Spell Sutra to meet the Northern Dipper killing sword that was about to come. As a 5th grade magical power, the White Tiger 7 Constellations knife had no chance of competing with the Northern Dipper killing sword, but the one who performed the Northern Dipper killing sword was only Zhao Jing's nightmare, which made the power of this magical power more than one level lower, and not even the 3rd grade level. Secondly, Meng Zuling's White Tiger 7 Constellations blade was also blessed by the Yuanxi golden pill she simulated, making its power close to the 4th level. This made the two of them evenly matched. With a bang, the Big Dipper killing sword and the White Tiger 7 Constellations knife collided and broke into pieces. The huge power not only sent Meng Suling flying backwards, but also affected the battles of Siyu Izish, the Suine sword, Feng Qingxin, the Spring River sword, and Taoying, the sword of Liu, making them all glare at Zhao Jing. As a master of magical powers, even if he was fighting with all his strength, his divine sense could still know the ins and outs of what had just happened, and he naturally felt disgusted with Zhao Jing's despicable behavior. But Zhao Jing seemed to have gone completely crazy at this time, and he actually rushed towards Meng Suling regardless of anything, trying to direct the attack of Shifeng to her again. Meng Suling, who was retreating quickly, narrowed her eyes slightly. It was not that she could not beat the nightmare Shifeng that Zhao Jing had embodied in his mind, but she was playing the role of Tang Mao at this time, and could not use other methods that were too obvious. She could only use the magical powers of the Tang Mao heroine herself to resist the enemy. And she did not know Tang Mao's most powerful Big Dipper death curse. In other words, if you want to keep your identity from being exposed and complete the task of the young master, the only way now is, well, maybe Zhao Jing is so crazy, and the Meng family is also testing him? As his thoughts turned, Meng Zuling suddenly had a long-barreled rifle wrapped with electromagnetics in his hand, and the muzzle just touched the forehead of Zhao Jing, who rushed over. Then, Meng Zuling pulled the trigger without any hesitation. The next moment, bang! With the sound of the gun, Zhao Jing's head exploded, and his nightmare also dissipated immediately. Since it is difficult to solve the nightmare without being exposed, just kill the person who embodies the nightmare. And this electromagnetic sniper gun is not constructed by magic or supernatural powers, but a real supernatural weapon, which is one of the modified parts of Meng Zuling's body. Even if someone deduces it afterwards, they can only get the result that Tang Mao had no choice but to kill Zhao Jing with a magic weapon. What's more, there were several supernatural powers at the scene to testify for her. However, Meng Zuling, who tried hard to play the role of Tang Mao and did her best not to reveal any flaws, frowned, because it was not until then that she found the opportunity to contact Zhao Chen through the special connection brought by the contract, but did not receive a response from the other party. And at this moment, on the surface of the locking dragon pond in the dream, although Dangshan swordsman Liao Zuan was still unable to move, he did regain the ability to speak after the temple keeper King Yuan entered the mirror world. He glanced at Meng Guangling, who was in the immortal state and half out of control in the cage, and then turned his sight to the two Dangsha and Zenran who attacked him, and snorted coldly, "Who are you, and why are you helping the demons in the Dragon King Temple? Even if this temple keeper is said to have regained his humanity, he should never appear in the territory of Daksha. Besides, how did you do it?" The two Dangsha and Zenran, who had transformed into the appearance of King of Shu and Fairy Baimei, looked at each other, and the former answered carefully, "If I say that I didn't know that this King Yuan temple keeper was a member of our organization before Meng Guangling recognized her identity, do you believe it?" Fairy Baimei also added on the side, "I can only say that the master has great magical powers and can even subdue demons." At this point, she changed the subject and said with a smile, "However, since the King Yuan temple keeper is here in person, you should be relieved, right? At least she won't release the evil dragon and let it cause endless disasters in Shu." Liao Zuan was silent for a while and actually agreed with the words of the Fairy Baimei. Finally, he sighed. It is only natural for her to come back to retrieve her former body. No wonder the true lords did not stop her. After that, he looked at the two Dangshan again and asked, "Can you tell me the name of your organization?" In the mirror world, where the evil dragon was imprisoned in the dream, the temple priest of the Dragon King Temple was pressing the back of the dragon's neck with her palm, while chatting unilaterally with Zhao Chen, who was trapped in her time cage. "Little guy, do you know? As a demon, I joined an organization called Heaven more than 10 years ago. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels." Chapter 399, Escape. It is said that this organization has existed after the destruction of the ancient times, and all members call themselves by the names of gods from the mythological heaven. For example, the two who came with me this time are Zuan Wu Ziming God and Beihu Jianbing God. And I was recruited by the Jade Emperor himself and got the name Three Officials Emperor, but most members didn't know my true identity before. Of course, after this incident, it's probably not a secret within the organization anymore. The temple keeper King Yuan casually recounted the secrets of the secret organization called Heaven, as if he was just chatting about family matters. She paused for a moment and continued, "According to my observation, even the star god may be a member of this organization, and his status is not inferior to that of the great celestial lord, because all the immortal titles related to the stars must be conferred by him. And the so-called All Stars Association is a subordinate developed by him. Just like the Hao Tupings and Niang Niang who just took office developed the underworld. Oh, although the Heavenly Court has a long history, I had never heard of the name of this organization before the Great Celestial Lord recruited me. You know, there are not many things in this world that can be hidden from me. Especially for such a large organization, it is impossible that there are no clues at all. So, it either comes from history, or someone changed history and let it join reality. Or this organization only had a few people before, and it has only started to expand in the past 10 years. But no matter which one it is, it means that the Zhuanshan world is about to usher in a great change. And you, as a new candidate, it's nothing when your strength is low, but once you grow up, you will probably become a thorn in the eyes of some people in the Heavenly Court. But you are not without the protection of masters behind you. A certain existence has. At this point, she suddenly raised her head and glanced at the mirror formed by the pool of water again, and snorted, okay, I won't say more about you. You should know that I just want to make a good relationship with him, but I won't ruin your plan, and I won't report this matter to the Great Heavenly Venerable, otherwise that person would have arrived by now. I think you can roughly guess what that person's specific identity is. You may not be his opponent in Zhuanshan. At this moment, streams of bright red blood flowed from reality into dreams, and then from the pool of water in dreams into the mirror world, and finally merged into the metal pillars that bound the evil dragon. 1, 2, 3. In the blink of an eye, the surfaces of 8 pillars were stained with blood, and the originally indestructible seal was slightly shaken. Seeing this scene, although the face of the temple keeper of the Dragon King temple was still unclear, her excitement could be clearly felt. So she looked at Zhao Chen and the time cage again and said, there is still some time. I will tell you something else. For example, this sealed evil dragon is actually my body after Taoism. And my soul has been a puppet dominated by the Dragon King for a long time, a real demon. It was not until 30 years ago that I barely found my humanity. The purpose of my plan this time is to get it back and complete myself. However, in order to seal my body, 9 Dangsa real people sacrificed all their spiritual power to make these 9 pillars. Add to that the power of the Zhao Chen Xingchen Great Array, so even I can't break it by force, so I can only resort to some tricks. That is, I use the fear blood of the reincarnated bodies of the 9 real people to water the pillars, and I used it as a medium to cast a spell, to let it decay on its own. TSK, the 9 real people who had the hope of ascending to Zhuan were all reincarnated in this era. Although they had exhausted all their spiritual power, making it impossible for them to easily recover their past life memories like normal reincarnated real people, they were all outstanding people, and were not tabooed by the major sects and families. This makes this generation of true disciples who have entered the world so special. As soon as she finished speaking, another wisp of fear blood seeped in from the surface of the dragon locking pond, and fell on the surface of the last pillar. At this point, the temple keeper King Yuan stopped talking, but leaned on the reverse scale of the evil dragon and gradually merged into it. The next moment, the calm mirror world suddenly boiled, and the iron chain that bound the evil dragon and the pillars that fixed the iron chain seemed to have lost all their strength, and broke apart inch by inch. Boom. With a loud bang, the mirror world in the dream began to collapse. At this moment, the time cage surrounding Zhao Chen's exchanged body finally dissipated, making him disappear completely in a trance. On the surface of the dragon locking pond in the dream, Dangshan swordsman Liao Zhuang suddenly felt his whole body lighten, and the power that suppressed him disappeared without a trace. His eyes moved slightly, and a sword blade as huge as a mountain appeared out of thin air, slashing towards the king of Shu and the fairy Beimei. Although the two were chatting with Liao Zhuang, they did not relax their guard, so King Shu immediately transformed a pair of huge golden arms to block the attack of the giant sword, while fairy Beimei summoned many branches to wrap around the surface of the sword. She said coquettishly, "Old Liao, you are not being righteous. We didn't kill you when you were unable to move, but you attacked me." Hearing this, Liao Zhuang snorted and said, "When you attacked me before, you didn't notify me in advance." King Shu is at the true body level of the second level of Dangsun, one level higher than Liao Zhuang who only has Dharma appearance, so he easily crushed the mountain-like sword blade, and chuckled and said, "Liao Zhuang, I know you force your move to find out our strengths and weaknesses, or our true identities. But in your current state, it is impossible to force us to reveal our true means, so give up. Having said that, he paused, lowered his gaze, looked at the increasingly clear figure on the water surface, and continued, "What's more, the temple priest of the Dragon King temple will soon come out. Don't you save some energy to escape." As soon as he finished speaking, a giant dragon came out from the mirror, formed on the surface of the pond. First, the huge dragon head, followed by the long dragon body, thick dragon claws, and swaying dragon tail. And the speed was extremely fast. In just a dozen breaths, the entire 5-clawed dragon climbed up to the clouds, and was fully displayed in front of the 3 real people. My stomach hurts, so that's all for today. There will be more tomorrow. Chapter 400 Actions on the Other Side. As the dragon roared through the heaven and earth, the majesty of the real dragon was filled with absolute suppression of the lower ranking people, making Liao Zuan tremble all over. For a moment, he felt that he could not control his own armor image, and almost had the impulse to crawl on the ground. It was very difficult for him to stabilize his body, and did not fall into the pool. But even so, he lost the ability to move again. He could only watch the giant dragon open its huge mouth and spray an invisible dark light at the already half-Taoism sword crossing the hard sea Mengguangling Mengzenren. Liao Zhuang's face showed sadness, because he had recognized that the giant dragon used the flame of time. Although the temple priest of this Dragon King temple is not like the real Dragon King who can open his eyes for day, close his eyes for night, blow his breath for winter, and exhale his breath for summer, he is also a leader in this world in terms of time. In his opinion, the dragon was violent as soon as it escaped from the trap, obviously to vent its dissatisfaction with being imprisoned for a long time. Mengguangling, who was sprayed by the flame of time, was probably dead, and his lifespan was exhausted, and he died on the spot. Even Mengguangling, who indirectly helped her escape, was not spared, so he, the giant gemmaster, would not be spared. However, things did not develop in the direction he expected. Mengguangling, who was sprayed by the flame of time, not only did not age and die, but everything around him seemed to be frozen, without any change. Even his expanded Tao body was motionless, like an insect trapped in amber. This is freezing time. Liao Zuan reacted immediately, and asked in surprise, "What is she going to do?" The fairy Baimei on the side saw the clue, and said with a smile, "TSK. Mengguangling forced himself to display the state of Taoism. I'm afraid he can't recover on his own." The Qingyuan temple priest froze time to save him. After all, in his situation, apart from the ancient Kunlun Xianyang city lineage, only the Meng family's own Zhenjin can save him. The king of Shu nodded when he heard it. Is this repaying Mengguangling for bringing her into this dream? Although Zhenren Meng was calculated, objectively speaking, without him, it would be impossible to meet the conditions for entering the sealed land or even lifting the seal. It seems that maybe he has really found his humanity, and is no longer a demon. No wonder the intensity of the war on the East China Sea front has dropped a lot in recent years, and her food magazine was even sold in Daxia before. Just as King Yuan said to Zhao Chen, the 2 members of the Heavenly Court actually did not know the true identity of the 3 officials emperor before this mission. After solidifying the time around Mengguangling, King Yuan released the aura around him with all his strength, and with his fruit position, he forcibly tore open this dream, and returned to reality. Although she didn't have the ability to come in by herself, it was not difficult for her to get out. In the dragon locking pond, the geniuses of various sects and families had already eliminated the nightmares transformed by their own fear. Although casualties were inevitable, many Gangsha and Lion Qiao disciples brought by the magical monks died in the nightmare attack, but those who survived felt that their minds had become clear and gained great benefits. Therefore, even the 7 swords who were worried about their own Dangsuan elders smiled. Cultivators are people who fight for their lives with the heavens, and casualties are normal. Even if there is no disaster today, it is inevitable that some people will die just by discussing swords. The consensus of the cultivators in this world is that once they embark on the path of cultivation, life and death are left to fate, and even the court will no longer protect them. At this time, Feng Wantong, the Kahan desert with the very bad luck, was landing on the surface of the pond. While helping several refining monks to clear their nightmares, he condensed cold air, as if freezing the blood of the geniuses in the pond. His movements were extremely concealed, and even Zhang Rumeng, Li Crossing and others did not notice it. But at this moment, a giant dragon shrouded in mist emerged from the void, and its terrifying breath made everyone tremble all over, and unable to move at all. The dragon lowered its head, scanned the crowd, and finally set its sights on Feng Wantang on the water. Feng Wantang's scalp was numb from being looked at, but he didn't dare to look up at all, because a voice told him, "Don't look. If you look, you will die." Fortunately, the dragon only stared at him for a few seconds before looking away, climbing up the clouds, and disappeared in the air in an instant. I was scared to death. Feng Wantang exhaled a breath of turbid air, and shouted in his heart, "Senior Zhao, did that monster find you?" And in his soul, a drop of blood godson barely recovered from the trembling state. He took a while to respond. "Let's stop while we are ahead. Those real people are coming back." "Ah. That evil dragon didn't kill the real people." Feng Wantang was surprised. She just took back her body, and with the tacit consent of some people, she can barely move around in Daxia. But once she commits a murderous sin, the Zhao Chen Great Array will not sit idly by. By then, it is very likely that the real monarchs who came will seal her again. A slightly hoarse voice sounded in Feng Wantang's mind. "So that's how it is." Feng Wantang nodded thoughtfully. At this moment, the four real people, King of Shu, Fairy Beimei, Swordsman of Dangshan, and Swordsman of the Heart Sea who was in the state of Taoism, also appeared above the lake one after another. Among them, King of Shu and Fairy Beimei did not stay for long, and disappeared in an instant. Because of the difference in strength, Swordsman of Dangshan Liao Zuan could only watch them leave, with no way. He sighed, and then used his magical powers to cover up the figure of Meng Wanling in the amber of time and space. Although because time was frozen, even the pollution could not spread, but if low-level cultivators saw it, they would still be affected to a certain extent. At this time, Meng Sichen flew over quickly, and while bowing to Liao Zuan, he anxiously asked, "Master Liao, what happened to my great uncle?" In order to prevent the evil dragon from escaping, Senior Meng took the initiative to show the state of Taoism. Unfortunately, it still failed. Faced with this question, Liao Zuan did not reveal much about what happened in the dream, but simply replied, "His body is now frozen in time. You should bring him back to the Meng family as soon as possible. Maybe Master Zhengchang has a way to save him." This, Meng Sichen frowned, but soon nodded and said, "Thank you Master Liao for telling me. Please forgive me for my impoliteness. I'll take my leave now." After saying that, he casually slashed out a sword energy, cut a hole in the void, and put his great uncle who was covered by the time and space amber into it. After doing this, Meng Sichen bowed to Liao Zuan again, and then turned into a sword light, and rushed into the sky. With his lead, all the young monks who came to participate in the sword conference followed suit, and said goodbye one after another. Liao Zuan thought of the big-headed boy who might still be fighting with the Yinsi, and he was anxious to go to support him and sighed, "Forget it. This sword conference is because my sword pavilion didn't host me well, so please do as you please." After that, he sent a message to his own king and sword Li Crossing, Mao and sword Gushan and others, asking them to go to the formation center outside the locking dragon pond to deal with the Yinsi people who might still be there, and then changed his own state and stepped into the Yinchi where the big-headed boy was. After getting the permission of the real person, Meng Zuling, who had re-established contact with Zhao Chen, breathed a sigh of relief and chose to travel with Siyu Izish, Feng Qingxin, and Tao Ying, 3 magical powers, so that there would be no one to take care of them in case of any accidents. Siyu Izish had been paying attention to Meng Zuling's expression. After leaving the dragon locking pond, this young man who was said to be romantic and charming, very popular with women, asked with a smile, "Fairy Tang looked worried just now, but were you worried about that little brother Zhaofu?" Meng Zuling glanced at him, nodded, and said frankly, "Zhaofu is the one that Chen Lang has taken a fancy to." Siyu Izish's smile froze, but he quickly adjusted himself and said, "Fairy is no longer worried now, and that little brother Zhao must have escaped. Did he see or hear anything in his dream?" Hearing this question, Feng Qingsun and Tao Ying, who had been watching the fun, also pricked up their ears. Obviously, they also wanted to find out what caused the change in this sword discussion conference. Meng Zuling shook his head and said, he is a cultivator who has practiced refining qi. What can he hear and see? Besides, although I have contact with him, the most I can do is to report that he is safe. Cu Izish and the other two felt that this reply was reasonable, and they were not disappointed. Sada Fuliu Taoying directly changed the subject and suggested, although we were not able to appreciate the profound magical powers of various sects this time and we also encountered danger, it is also a happy thing to be able to kill the nightmare and make the mind clear. How about we go to Deschenglao for a drink together? The immortal wine of Deschenglao is famous in Shuzhou, but due to the monthly output of only 30 kilograms, I have never been able to taste it. This time I have to rely on the help of you, Fairy Tao. As a disciple of the ancient poetry sword school who is of the same blood as the Qingcheng sword school, Feng Qingsun immediately agreed. Deschen Tower is the property of the Qingcheng sword school, located in the county seat of Guangnan County. Cu Izish had no objection to this, and only looked at Meng Zuling. Meng Zuling wanted to refuse, but after asking Zhao Chen for instructions, he changed his mind and agreed. So the four of them headed east all the way, straight to Guangnan County. Some time ago, Jingguan City, just when the King of Shu and the Fairy Beimei teamed up to attack the Dongshan Sword Su, all the Yanxi members lurking in the city also began their promised actions. For a time, not only various martial arts halls, gangs, and family residences, but even the 6 gates and the Sword Pavilion residences were harassed. The whole city was full of the roar of spells and the sound of swords clashing. At the same time, Ling Leo and Zi Zhangqi, who had been waiting for an opportunity, also found the back door of Huai Meng Zhao Yuan where the princess lived. 3000 words. One more chapter later. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.